Welcome back to Haunted Fears. Deep in the Appalachian Mountains, there are places where reality bends, where the earth itself seems to remember things it shouldn't, and where people vanish without explanation. Tonight, I'm sharing 11 encounters from these ancient hills, stories that were whispered to me by people who can't forget what they experienced. Some of these accounts have kept me awake, staring at my ceiling, wondering what's really out there in those dark hollows and forgotten valleys. Each one is different. Each one is deeply unsettling, and each one will make you question what you thought you knew about these mountains. So, Haunted Fears horror family, if you're ready to dive into the darkness with me, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Now, turn off your lights, because once you hear what happened in these woods, you'll understand why some roads in Appalachia don't appear on any map, and why some doors, once opened, should never have been touched. Have you ever stood in a place you know existed yesterday, holding proof you were there, while everyone tells you it never was? I'm Surf, and I'm about to tell you about the 3 days last October that made me question everything I thought I knew about reality. I've been hiking the Smokies for 15 years. I know these mountains like the back of my hand. Every trail, every overlook, every ranger station within a 50-mile radius of Gatlinburg. I'm not some weekend warrior who gets lost looking for Instagram photos. I'm out here every month, sometimes alone, sometimes with my hiking group, but always prepared, always careful. That's why what happened to me doesn't make any sense. That's why I still wake up at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, trying to rationalize the impossible. It started on a Thursday morning in mid-October. The leaves were at peak color, brilliant reds and golds that made the mountains look like they were on fire. I'd planned a solo backpacking trip, 3 days and 2 nights on a route I'd mapped out through some of the more remote sections of the Smokies. The forecast was perfect. Clear skies, temperatures in the low 60s during the day, 40s at night. I loaded my pack, checked my GPS, and hit the trail at sunrise. The first 8 miles were exactly what I expected. I passed 2 other hikers early on, exchanged the usual pleasantries, and then had the trail to myself. By noon, I was deep into the backcountry, surrounded by nothing but ancient trees and the sound of my boots on the dirt path. The air had that crisp autumn smell, decomposing leaves mixed with pine and mountain air. It was perfect. Around 2 in the afternoon, I decided to take a short detour. There was an old logging road marked on my topographical map, abandoned decades ago, that connected to a ridge I'd never explored. I'm always looking for new routes, new perspectives on these mountains I love so much. The logging road was overgrown, but still visible, and I figured I'd follow it for a mile or so, see where it led, then loop back to the main trail before dark. That's when I saw the cabin. It was maybe half a mile off the logging road, tucked into a small clearing surrounded by massive hemlocks. At first, I thought it might be one of the old Appalachian homesteads that dot these mountains. There are dozens of them, remnants of families who lived up here before the national park was established in the 1930s. But as I got closer, something felt off. The cabin was in too good of condition. These old homesteads are usually just stone chimneys and rotted logs by now. Maybe a few foundation stones if you're lucky. But this structure was intact. The logs were weathered but solid. The roof had moss growing on it, but there were no obvious holes. The door hung slightly crooked on its hinges, and 2 small windows flanked it. Their glass long gone, but the frame still standing. I should have turned around right then. Every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what. It was just a cabin, just an old building in the woods. Still, the air around it felt different. Heavier somehow, like the atmospheric pressure had changed. The birdsong that had been constant all day had stopped. The forest was completely silent. I approached slowly, my hand instinctively going to the bear spray on my belt. Not that bear spray would do anything against a building, but it made me feel better. The clearing around the cabin was unnatural, perfectly circular, maybe 40 feet in diameter. with the cabin dead center. The grass was short, almost manicured, which made no sense. This deep in the backcountry, clearings fill in fast. They don't maintain themselves. The door was unlocked. It swung open with a creak that sounded too loud in the silence. Inside was a single room, maybe 15 by 15 feet. There was a stone fireplace against the back wall, a rough-hewn table near the center, and a few pieces of furniture that looked handmade. A chair, a small shelf, what might have been a bed frame in the corner. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust and cobwebs. What caught my attention was the fireplace. Someone had carved symbols into the stones around it, spirals and geometric patterns that looked almost Celtic, but not quite right. The symbols had a deliberate quality to them, carefully etched deep into the rock. They didn't look like the crude carvings you sometimes find at campsites. These were purposeful, precise, almost ritualistic. I pulled out my phone to take pictures. No service, of course. I was miles from the nearest cell tower, but the camera still worked. I snapped photos of the symbols, the interior of the cabin, the clearing outside. I checked my GPS to mark the location, 35.6347 degree N, 83.04 ear 9 water W. I made a note to look up the coordinates when I got back to civilization, see if this place was documented anywhere. Then I noticed something on the table. Underneath the dust and debris was what looked like a leather-bound journal. My hands were shaking as I picked it up, not from fear exactly, but from anticipation. Finding artifacts like this is incredibly rare, and this looked old, really old. The journal's pages were brittle, yellow with age. The handwriting inside was cramped and difficult to read, written in faded ink that was barely visible. I could make out a few words here and there. Mountain, waiting, door, return. But most of it was illegible. The last entry had a date, October 17th, 1952. I photographed every page, working quickly because the light was starting to fade. It was almost 4 o'clock, and I needed to get back to the trail and set up camp before dark. I carefully placed the journal back on the table exactly where I'd found it, then stepped outside. That's when I realized the sun was in the wrong position. When I'd entered the cabin, it had been to my left, west-southwest. Now it was to my right, almost due east. That didn't make any sense unless I checked my watch. 4:47 p.m. I'd been inside the cabin for 45 minutes, but it had felt like 10 at most. The silence was still oppressive. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just dead, heavy quiet. I got out of that clearing as fast as I could without running, my heart hammering in my chest. The logging road was exactly where I'd left it, and I followed it back to the main trail, checking my GPS every few minutes to make sure I was going the right way. By the time I reached the trail, the sun was setting. I hiked another 2 miles to my planned campsite, set up my tent, and forced myself to eat a meal I didn't want. My mind kept going back to that cabin, to the symbols, to the journal, to the missing time. I told myself I'd been distracted while photographing the pages, that's all. Time gets away from you sometimes. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the forest seemed amplified. Branches breaking, animals moving through the underbrush, the wind in the trees. Except there was no wind. I kept checking. The air was completely still, but I could hear what sounded like wind anyway. A low whistling that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The next morning, I broke camp at first light and hiked straight back to the logging road. I had to see the cabin again, had to prove to myself it was real. I had the coordinates, I had photographs, it would be there. Except it wasn't. I followed my GPS to the exact coordinates I'd marked, 35.647 degree N, 83.0491 W. I was standing in the spot where the cabin had been. I was sure of it. But there was nothing there. No cabin, no clearing, just virgin forest, thick underbrush, towering trees, and decades of undisturbed leaf litter. I spent 2 hours searching the area. I widened my search radius, thinking maybe my GPS had been off. Maybe I'd marked the coordinates wrong. But there was nothing. No sign that a structure had ever existed there. No depression in the ground where a building might have stood. No remnants of a clearing. Nothing. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold. There were footprints. My footprints, leading from the logging road to this spot and then back out. I could see them clearly in the soft forest floor. The prints led right up to where I was standing, circled around in the exact pattern I would have walked if I'd been exploring a clearing, then led back out. I checked my phone. The photographs were still there, dozens of them. The cabin exterior, the interior, the symbols on the fireplace, every page of that journal. The images were clear, detailed, undeniable. I zoomed in on the photo of the cabin exterior. In the background, I could see the distinctive shape of a peak I recognized. Mount LeConte, visible only from that specific ridge. I was in the right place. I took photographs of the forest as it currently appeared, from the same angles as my previous shots. Then I hiked back to my car, loaded my gear, and drove straight to the ranger station near Sugarlands. The ranger on duty was a woman in her 50s, who'd worked in the Smokies for 20 years. I showed her my photographs, explained what had happened. She listened politely, looked at the images, then pulled up the park's historical database on her computer. "There's no record of any structure at those coordinates," she told me. "That area was surveyed in 1934 when the park was established, and again in 1968 and 2003. No buildings, no homesteads, nothing." "But I have pictures," I said, showing her again. She studied them for a long time, zooming in on the symbols carved into the fireplace. "These look familiar," she finally said. "There are some old folk stories about carvings like this. Appalachian protection symbols, supposedly used to ward off. Well, different things depending on who you ask. Evil spirits, bad luck, things that don't belong in our world." "Where would they be?" I asked. "On real buildings, I mean." She shook her head. "I've never seen them on any documented structures. They're just stories, oral tradition, the kind of thing people talk about around campfires." She paused. "Look, I've been working these mountains for 2 decades. I've heard lots of strange things, seen a few I can't explain. There are places in these hills that feel wrong, coordinates where hikers get disoriented even with GPS, spots where electronics malfunction for no reason. We don't talk about it officially, but we all know." "So you believe me?" "I believe you experienced something," she said carefully. "Whether it was that cabin or something else, I don't know. But I'd advise you not to go back to that area. Whatever you found, or whatever found you, it's not something to mess with." I left the ranger station feeling more unsettled than before. When I got home, I uploaded all the photographs to my computer and started researching. The symbols from the fireplace matched descriptions of old Appalachian warding signs like the ranger had said, but nothing exact. The date in the journal, October 17th, 1952, didn't correspond to any significant events I could find in the historical records. Then I started looking into disappearances in the Smokies. There have been hundreds over the years, people who vanished without a trace in the mountains. Most are eventually found, but some never are. I found an article from 1952 about a man who went missing in October of that year, last seen hiking alone in the backcountry. His name was in the article. He was never found. The next week, I couldn't help myself. I went back to the mountains with 2 friends from my hiking group. I didn't tell them the whole story, just said I wanted to show them an interesting spot I'd found. We hiked to the logging road, then to the coordinates. The forest looked exactly like it had the week before. No cabin, no clearing. But my friends noticed something I hadn't. "Why is it so quiet here?" one of them asked. We all stopped and listened. No birds, no insects, just that heavy, oppressive silence. "And why are there footprints everywhere?" the other one said. He was right. The forest floor was covered in them. My prints from the previous week, but also other prints. Boot prints in different sizes, overlapping and circling the same area where I'd seen the cabin. Some looked fresh, some looked old, filled partially with debris and water. We followed the prints in different directions. They all led from various points in the forest to this one spot, circled around, then led back out. Some of them didn't lead back out. They just stopped, mid-stride, as if the person making them had vanished mid-step. We got out of there fast. Neither of my friends said much on the hike back, but I could tell they were shaken. We haven't talked about it since. That was 6 months ago. I've been back to the Smokies a dozen times since then, but I avoid that section of the park. I still have the photographs on my computer. I look at them sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, trying to understand what I experienced. The cabin existed. I have proof. But it also doesn't exist, and I have proof of that too. Both things are simultaneously true, and I don't know how that's possible. Last month, I was reading about quantum physics, specifically about the observer effect, the idea that the act of observation changes what's being observed. I know that's oversimplifying it, but it made me wonder, did I create that cabin by observing it? Or did it exist in some state between real and unreal until I stumbled into that spot? Or maybe, and this is the thought that keeps me awake, maybe I'm the one who's not entirely here anymore. Maybe I walked into that cabin and never walked back out, and everything since then has been something else, some echo or shadow of my life continuing, while the real me is still standing in that clearing, trying to find my way home. I don't know. I'll probably never know. All I can tell you for certain is this. There are places in these mountains that don't follow the rules we think we understand. There are doors that open when they shouldn't, and some of them lead to places that exist and don't exist at the same time. And if you're ever hiking in the Smokies and you find yourself in a clearing that's too perfect, around a cabin that's too intact, with symbols carved into stones that seem to whisper at the edges of your perception, turn around. Don't go inside. Don't take photographs. Don't try to understand it. Just leave and don't look back, because some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Some doors aren't meant to be opened, and some places in these ancient mountains remember things that the rest of the world has forgotten, things that are waiting patiently for someone curious enough or foolish enough to find them again. I found one, and even though I walked away, I'm not sure it's done with me yet. Some nights I dream about that cabin. I dream I'm walking toward it through the silent forest, and the door is open, and there's someone standing in the doorway waiting for me. They never have a face. They never speak. They just wait. And every time I wake up from that dream, I check my GPS, just to make sure I'm still where I'm supposed to be, just to make sure the coordinates of my bedroom match what they should. So far, they always do, but I keep checking anyway, because I know now that reality isn't as solid as we like to think. The boundaries between what is and what isn't are thinner than we imagine, especially here in these old mountains where the earth itself seems to dream. And sometimes, when you cross those boundaries, you bring something back with you, or you leave something behind. I'm still not sure which one happened to me. All I know is that I'm Surf, and I found a cabin that doesn't exist. And somewhere in these mountains, that cabin is still waiting, for me or for the next person who stumbles into the right coordinates at the right time. Maybe it'll be you, and if it is, remember what I told you. Turn around, walk away. Don't make the same mistake I did. Because some places remember, and once they remember you, they never really let go. Can you imagine hearing someone whistle to you from behind a wall of rock that's been sealed for 60 years, and the melody getting closer with every step you take? I'm Surf, and I work demolition, not ghost hunting. But what happened to me in that mine changed everything I thought I knew about what's possible. Let me be straight with you. I'm not the type to believe in paranormal stuff. I'm a working man, 42 years old, been doing demolition and salvage work for 20 years. I tear down old buildings, strip copper wire, salvage what I can sell. It's hard work, dirty work, but it pays the bills. When my cousin told me about the abandoned mine in McDowell County, I saw dollar signs, not danger. Old mines are full of valuable metal if you know where to look and you're willing to take the risk. This was back in March, early spring, when the weather was just starting to turn. My cousin had done some research, found records of a place called the Blackwell No. 3, a coal operation that shut down in 1963 after a cave-in killed 40 men. The entrance had been sealed, but he'd heard from some locals that there was a ventilation shaft about half a mile up the ridge that was still accessible. We figured we'd check it out, see if there was anything worth the trip. We drove out on a Saturday morning, just the two of us in his beat-up pickup. The mine was in the middle of nowhere, down a dirt road that hadn't been maintained in decades, surrounded by hills, covered in scrub brush and stunted trees. The whole area had that abandoned feel to it, like the land itself had given up after the mine closed. We found the ventilation shaft exactly where the locals said it would be, a concrete structure about 6 feet square, with a rusted metal grate covering the opening. My cousin had brought bolt cutters. The grate came off easy. The bolts were so rusted they practically fell apart when we touched them. Inside was a vertical shaft with a ladder bolted to the wall, disappearing down into darkness. We'd brought headlamps, rope, basic climbing gear. My cousin went down first. I remember standing there at the top looking down into that black hole and feeling my stomach twist. Something about it felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly. I'd been in plenty of dangerous situations doing this kind of work. It was something else, something I couldn't put my finger on. But my cousin was already halfway down, his headlamp bouncing off the walls, and I wasn't about to let him go alone. The ladder went down maybe 60 feet. At the bottom was a horizontal tunnel, about 7 feet high and maybe 5 feet wide, shored up with old timber supports that were black with age and moisture. The air smelled like wet rock and coal dust and something else, something sweet and rotten that made me want to gag. Our headlamps cut through the darkness, showing rails on the floor where mine cars used to run. "You hear that?" my cousin asked. I stopped and listened. At first, I didn't hear anything except our breathing and the drip of water somewhere deeper in the tunnel. Then I caught it. A faint whistling sound, musical and steady, coming from somewhere ahead of us. "Probably just air moving through the tunnels," I said, even though I didn't believe it. Air doesn't whistle in a melody. Air doesn't carry a tune. We kept going, following the main tunnel deeper into the mine. The rails branched off in several directions, but we stuck to the main passage. Every 50 feet or so, there were side tunnels, most of them blocked by cave-ins or marked with faded yellow paint that said "Danger, do not enter." The whistling got louder the deeper we went, and I started to recognize the tune. It was Barbara Allen, an old folk song my grandmother used to sing. The melody was perfect, every note clear and precise, echoing through the tunnels, like it was coming from everywhere at once. "That ain't no air current," my cousin said quietly. His voice was tight, nervous. "That's somebody whistling." "Can't be," I said. "This mine's been closed since '63. Nobody's been down here in 60 years. "Then who's whistling?" We should have turned around right then. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out, but we were already a quarter mile into the mine, and turning back felt like admitting we were scared. So we kept going, following the sound, telling ourselves we'd just check around one more corner, see what was making that noise. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, maybe 30 feet across. Our headlamps showed timber supports holding up the ceiling, rails converging from multiple tunnels, what looked like an old loading station where miners used to bring coal up from the deeper shafts. And the whistling was louder here, so loud it seemed to be coming from the walls themselves, surrounding us, getting inside our heads. That's when my cousin's headlamp caught something on the far side of the chamber. There was a tunnel entrance there, and painted above it in faded white letters were the words, "Lower Shaft, Condemned 1963. Below that, someone had spray-painted a newer message in red. "They're still down there." "We need to leave," my cousin said. "Right now." I agreed. We turned to go back the way we'd come, but the whistling changed. It stopped being Barbara Allen and became something else. Something I'd never heard before. A melody that was almost familiar but wrong somehow, like someone had taken a normal song and twisted it into something that hurt to hear. And it was moving, coming toward us. We ran. I don't care how that sounds, two grown men running through a mine like scared children. But that's what we did. Our headlamps bounced wildly off the walls as we sprinted back through the tunnels, and behind us, the whistling followed. It never got quieter. It stayed at the same volume no matter how fast we ran, like whatever was making it was keeping pace with us, matching our speed exactly. My cousin tripped over one of the rails and went down hard. I grabbed him, pulled him up, and that's when I made the mistake of looking back. My headlamp caught something in the tunnel behind us, a shape, darker than the darkness around it, moving toward us. It was tall, too tall to be a man, and it moved wrong, like it was gliding instead of walking. And the whistling was coming from it, from this thing that shouldn't exist, that couldn't exist. We reached the ladder, and my cousin went up first, climbing so fast I thought he'd fall. I was right behind him, my hand slipping on the wet rungs, the whistling echoing up the shaft after us. When we got to the top, we didn't stop. We ran to the truck, threw our gear in the bed, and my cousin floored it down that dirt road, both of us too scared to talk, too scared to even look at each other. We drove straight to a bar in the nearest town and ordered whiskey. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the glass. After the third drink, my cousin finally spoke. "What was that?" he asked. "I don't know." "Did you see it? That thing?" I nodded. I'd seen it. I couldn't explain what I'd seen, but I'd seen it. The bartender had been listening. He was an old guy, 70 at least, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent his life in the coal towns. "You boys went into Blackwell number 3, didn't you?" We stared at him. "How'd you know?" my cousin asked. "Because you got that look. Everybody who goes down there and comes back has that look." He poured himself a shot, downed it. "My daddy worked that mine. He was there the day it collapsed. He wasn't one of the 40 who died, but he never talked about what happened down there, not really. Only thing he ever said was that the collapse didn't kill those men. Something else did. Something that had been down in the deep shafts for a long time, maybe since before the mine was even dug. The collapse just sealed it in with them." "That's insane," I said. "Maybe. But there's a reason nobody goes down there. There's a reason the company sealed every entrance they could find. It wasn't just about safety regulations." He looked at us hard. "You boys heard it, didn't you? The whistling." We both nodded. "That's how it calls. That's how it's always called. Miners used to hear it in the deep shafts, said it sounded like one of their buddies whistling to let them know where they were. But when they'd follow the sound, they'd find empty tunnels. And sometimes men would disappear, just vanish underground, never found. The company didn't report most of it because they didn't want to shut down production. They just kept digging, kept sending men down, and the whistling kept happening." "What about the collapse?" my cousin asked. "What really happened?" The bartender shook his head. "Nobody knows for sure. My daddy said there was an explosion, but the inspectors couldn't find what caused it. Some of the men who got out said the tunnels had changed, like the mine itself had rearranged while they were working. They said they heard the whistling getting louder and louder, coming from everywhere at once, and then everything just came down. 40 men were in the lower shafts when it happened. They never got the bodies out. The company just sealed it and walked away." I finished my whiskey and ordered another. "You're saying there's something down there? Something that's been down there since 1963. "I'm saying there's something down there that's been there a lot longer than that. The coal in these mountains is millions of years old. Who knows what else is down there, buried in the dark waiting?" The bartender walked away, leaving us with that thought. We didn't go back to the mine. We didn't salvage anything, didn't make any money on that trip. For a couple of weeks, I tried to convince myself we'd imagined it, that we'd gotten spooked and let our imaginations run wild. But then I started having the dreams. Every night, the same dream. I'm back in the mine, walking through those tunnels, and the whistling is all around me. I'm following it deeper and deeper, past the loading chamber, through the condemned tunnel, down into shafts that go on forever. And ahead of me, barely visible in the darkness, is that shape. That tall, wrong shape that moves like it's gliding. It's leading me somewhere, and I'm following even though I know I shouldn't, even though every part of me is screaming to turn around. In the dream, I always reach the same place, a massive chamber deep underground, so big my headlamp can't reach the far walls. And the chamber is full of them. Dozens of those shapes, maybe hundreds, all standing perfectly still, all facing the same direction, all whistling the same melody in perfect harmony. And then they turn toward me, all at once, and I wake up. The dreams got worse, more vivid, more detailed. I started waking up with coal dust under my fingernails, even though I hadn't been near a mine. I started hearing the whistling during the day, faint and distant, like it was calling me from somewhere far away. My cousin stopped returning my calls. When I finally showed up at his house, his wife told me he'd been committed to a psychiatric facility. He'd had a breakdown, she said. He wouldn't stop talking about the mine, wouldn't stop hearing the whistling. I tried to find information about Blackwell No. 3. I went to the county archives, looked through old newspaper articles, mining company records. The official story matched what the bartender had said. Collapse in 1963, 40 men killed, mine permanently sealed. But I found something else, too. An old journal in the Historical Society's collection, written by a mine supervisor in 1958, 5 years before the collapse. One entry stood out. It was dated October 3rd, 1958. The men are refusing to work the lower shafts. They say the whistling has gotten worse, that it follows them now. Johnson says he saw something moving in shaft 7, something tall and dark that shouldn't be there. I told the superintendent we need to close those shafts, seal them off, but he says production can't stop. The company needs the coal. I don't know how much longer I can keep the men working down there. Something is wrong. Something has always been wrong in those deep tunnels. 5 years later, the mine collapsed. 40 men died in the lower shafts, the same shafts the supervisor had wanted to seal. I haven't been back to McDowell County. I haven't been in any mine since that day. But the whistling hasn't stopped. I hear it sometimes at night when everything is quiet, coming from somewhere far away. It's faint, barely audible, but it's there. And I know what it is. I know what it wants. It's calling me back, calling me down into the dark, down into those tunnels that go deeper than any mine should go, down to where those 40 men went in 1963 and never came back, down to where something has been waiting, patient and hungry, for longer than anyone knows. My cousin was right to break down. Maybe that's the smart response, the sane response. 'Cause I'm still out here, still hearing it, and I know that one day I'm going to follow that sound. I'm going to go back to that mine, climb down that shaft, and walk through those tunnels until I find whatever is making that noise. Not because I want to, because I have to. Because once you hear it, really hear it, it gets inside your head and it doesn't let go. It becomes part of you, part of your thoughts, part of your dreams. It's patient. It can wait. It's been waiting down there in the dark for millions of years. What's a few more weeks or months until I finally give in and come back? I'm Surf, and I made the mistake of going into Blackwell No. 3. I heard the whistling. I saw what lives down there in the deep tunnels. And now it's heard me too. It knows I'm out here, and sooner or later, it's going to call me home. The whistling never stops. It's always there, just at the edge of hearing, patient and constant, waiting for me to listen, waiting for me to follow. And God help me, I think I'm finally ready to go. How would you feel scrolling through hundreds of photos from your property, only to realize something has been studying you for weeks, and last night it finally approached? I'm Carter, a hunter, and what my trail camera captured in the Allegheny Mountains made me abandon land my family's owned for 3 generations. I've been hunting these mountains since I was 12 years old. My grandfather bought 40 acres back in 1967, deep in the Allegheny Range on the Virginia side, about an hour from any town worth mentioning. It's been in the family ever since. Rough, steep terrain covered in oak and hickory, with a creek running through the bottom of the property. Good deer hunting, black bear sometimes, the occasional turkey. I know every ridge, every hollow, every game trail like I know my own backyard. 3 years ago, I set up a trail camera on the North Ridge, about a quarter mile from my hunting blind. Standard setup, motion activated, infrared for night shots, SD card that holds about 2,000 images. I check it every 2 weeks during hunting season, every month or so the rest of the year. Mostly I get deer, raccoons, the occasional fox. Once I got a bobcat, which was pretty cool. Nothing unusual. Nothing that made me think twice about walking through those woods alone. This past October, I went up to check the camera before rifle season started. It was a Thursday afternoon. Weather just starting to turn cold, leaves mostly down. I pulled the SD card, replaced the batteries, headed back to my truck. That night at home, I plugged the card into my laptop to see what I had. The first 1,847 photos were normal. Deer, lots of deer. A few raccoons. One nice 8-point buck I made a note to watch for. The timestamps showed activity throughout September and early October, mostly at dawn and dusk like you'd expect. Everything looked good. Then I got to photo 1,348. Timestamp October 8th, 11:47 p.m. It showed the clearing in front of the camera, trees in the background, infrared giving everything that grainy gray-white look. And standing behind the large oak tree on the left side of the frame, partially hidden, was something tall. Really tall. The tree trunk obscured most of it, but I could see what looked like a shoulder, part of a torso, and this is what made my stomach drop. One long arm reaching around the tree, hand gripping the bark. The hand was wrong. Too long, fingers too thin, positioned at an angle that didn't look natural. I stared at that photo for maybe 5 minutes, zooming in, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe it was a person, some trespasser on my land. But the proportions were off. The shoulder was too high, the arm too long, and we were miles from anywhere. Why would someone be out there at midnight? Photo 1,849, taken 3 seconds later, showed the figure had moved. It was stepping out from behind the tree, still mostly obscured but more visible now. I could see more of the torso, unnaturally thin and elongated. The head was above the frame, too tall for the camera angle. It was definitely moving toward the camera. My hands were shaking as I clicked to the next photo. Photo 1,350, 5 seconds after the previous one. The thing was closer now, maybe 15 feet from the camera. Still no head visible. It was too tall, standing probably 8 or 9 feet at least. The torso was bare, pale in the infrared, and I could see both arms now, hanging at its sides, way too long for its body. The hands nearly reached its knees. But what really got me were the legs. They were bent wrong, like the knees hyperextended backward. And it wasn't walking like a person walks. It was gliding, almost, like its feet weren't quite touching the ground right. Photo 1,151. 3 seconds later, close up. The thing had come right up to the camera, leaning down, and for the first time I could see the face. I wish I couldn't. I wish I'd never seen it. The face took up most of the frame, long, narrow, with huge eyes that reflected the infrared like an animal's. The mouth was too wide, opened slightly, showing teeth that were too sharp and too many. But the worst part was that it was looking directly into the camera lens, not past it, not around it, right into it, like it knew exactly what it was and what it was for. I slammed the laptop shut, sat there in my kitchen for maybe 20 minutes, heart hammering, trying to breathe, told myself it had to be fake, some malfunction with the camera, corrupted files. But I'd been using trail cameras for 15 years. I knew what corrupted files looked like. This wasn't that. I opened the laptop again, forced myself to look at the next photo. Photo 1,852. Timestamp October 8th, 11:48 p.m. The camera's view was crooked now, pointing at the ground. I could see grass and leaves in sharp focus. The thing had moved the camera, angled it down. The next 47 photos were all the same. Just ground, leaves, a rock. Then, photo 1900. Timestamp, October 9th, 4:23 a.m. The camera had been moved again, repositioned to its original angle facing the clearing. Everything looked normal, like nothing had happened. After that, the photos went back to normal. Deer at dawn, raccoons at night, more deer. Nothing unusual at all for the next 3 weeks. Except, I zoomed in on every single photo from October 9th onward. Started really studying them. And that's when I noticed it. In photo 1934, taken October 12th at dusk, there was a deer in the foreground. And way back in the trees, barely visible, was a shape. Tall, thin, standing perfectly still between two trees, watching. Photo 2006, October 15th, early morning, 3 deer feeding, and in the background, behind a stand of brush, another shape, closer than before. Photo 2157, October 19th, just after dark, a raccoon near the camera, and at the very edge of the frame, partially cut off, something tall standing at the tree line, even closer. It was in dozens of photos, always in the background, always partially hidden, always watching, and it was getting closer, frame by frame, night by night, moving in. The last photo on the card was number 2203, timestamp October 25th, 11:59 p.m. The clearing was empty, nothing visible, but written in the metadata, something I only thought to check because by this point I was desperate for answers, was a note I didn't write. Couldn't have written because I wasn't there. It said, "Coming tonight." I should explain that you can't edit trail camera metadata from the camera itself. You can only add notes when you upload photos to a computer. Someone, or something, had accessed my photos, had written that message, but the SD card had been in the camera the whole time, locked in a waterproof case, strapped to a tree in the middle of nowhere. I didn't sleep that night, kept the lights on, checked the locks, jumped at every sound. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a notification. My home security camera, the one pointed at my driveway, had detected motion. I pulled up the app with shaking hands. The video showed my truck, my front yard, the edge of the woods beyond, and standing at the tree line, barely visible in the camera's night vision, was something tall and thin, with arms that hung too long. It stood there for 30 seconds, perfectly still, just watching my house. Then it turned and walked back into the trees with that wrong, gliding motion. I packed a bag and left before sunrise. Drove to my brother's house 2 counties over and told him everything. He didn't believe me until I showed him the photos. Then his wife saw them, and she started crying. Said I needed to take the camera down, needed to stop going to that property, needed to leave it alone. But here's the thing, I couldn't leave it alone. I had to know what it was, what it wanted. So a week later, I went back, took my brother with me, broad daylight, both of us armed. We hiked up to the camera location. The camera was gone. The mounting strap had been cut, not torn, not broken, but cut clean through with something sharp. The tree where it had been mounted had scratch marks on it, deep gouges in the bark, starting about 8 feet up and going higher than we could see. We found the camera 30 feet away, smashed to pieces, the SD card missing, and carved into the tree trunk right where the camera had been were marks. Not random scratches, deliberate marks, symbols maybe, or writing in something I didn't recognize. They were fresh, the wood inside still pale, sap still seeping. We didn't stick around to investigate further. We left, damn near ran back to the truck. That was 6 weeks ago. I haven't been back to the property since. Haven't even driven past the access road. My brother thinks I should sell the land, but who would buy it? And what would I tell them? That something lives in those woods, something that watches and waits and knows when you're watching back. The worst part is the photos, not the ones from the trail. Camera, those are gone. But the ones that have started appearing on my phone, my personal phone, password protected, encrypted, always with me. 3 nights ago, I woke up to find a new photo in my gallery. I didn't take it. It showed my bedroom window, taken from outside, looking in. Taken at 2:47 a.m. while I was asleep. The angle suggested whatever took it was at least 7 feet tall. Last night, another one. My truck in a parking lot where I'd stopped for groceries. Taken from across the lot, zoomed in on the driver's side window. I was inside the store when it was taken. Checked the timestamp. And this morning, the most recent one. My brother's house where I'm staying. Taken from the woods behind his property. His back porch visible, lights on inside. Timestamp 5:14 a.m. It found me. Or maybe it never lost me. Maybe it's been following me since that first night it looked into the camera, since it saw me seeing it. Maybe taking that photo, capturing its image, created some kind of connection I don't understand. I'm Carter, and I made the mistake of trying to document the wildlife on my family's land. But what I documented wasn't wildlife. It was something else, something that's been in those mountains longer than my family, longer than anyone's family, something that doesn't like being watched, something that watches back. The photos keep coming, one every night now, always in the early morning hours, always taken from outside wherever I'm staying. They're getting closer. The first one was from 50 feet away, the second from 30. This morning's was from maybe 15 feet right at the tree line. I don't know what it wants. I don't know how to make it stop. All I know is that it's patient, and it's persistent, and it knows where I am. Every night, it gets a little closer. Every night, the photos show a slightly nearer perspective. My brother wants me to go to the police, but what would I tell them? That something from the mountains is stalking me through my phone. They'd think I was crazy. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe none of this is real, and I've had some kind of breakdown. But the photos are real. The scratch marks on that tree were real. The metadata message was real. And every morning when I check my phone, there's a new image waiting for me. Proof that something is out there in the dark, watching, waiting, getting closer. Last night's photo was taken from 10 feet away. Tomorrow morning, it'll probably be closer still. And eventually, maybe tonight, maybe next week, it won't be taking photos from outside anymore. It'll be inside. And I don't think it's going to stop with just pictures. I found a church 80 feet underwater that shouldn't exist, with someone still sitting in the front pew. I'm Owen, a technical diver, and what I discovered in Kentucky Lake 3 months ago has kept me from going back in the water since. I've been diving for 18 years, got my technical certification when I was 23. Technical diving is different from recreational. We go deeper, stay down longer, use special gas mixtures. I've explored shipwrecks in the Great Lakes, cave systems in Florida, underwater quarries across the Midwest. I've seen a lot of strange things at depth, equipment failures, weird marine life, optical illusions caused by nitrogen narcosis. But I've never seen anything that made me question reality itself. Not until Kentucky Lake. Last summer, a client hired me for a private dive. He was a local historian, maybe 70 years old, wanted someone to document what was left of Birmingham, one of the old towns that got flooded when they built Kentucky Dam back in the 1940s. The Tennessee Valley Authority had relocated most of the residents, torn down most of the buildings. But supposedly, there were still foundations down there, maybe some structures that got left behind. He wanted photos, measurements, documentation for a book he was writing. The money was good, and the dive sounded straightforward. Kentucky Lake isn't deep by technical standards. Most of it's under 100 feet, and the visibility's usually decent in late summer. We met at the Birmingham Point boat launch on a Tuesday morning in August. Calm weather, barely any wind. He showed me some old maps, pointed out where the town center used to be, gave me the GPS coordinates he wanted me to check out. There's supposed to be a church down there, he said. First Baptist, built in 1897. Records say it was demolished before the flooding, but there's been rumors for years that it's still standing. Divers claim they've seen it, but nobody's ever gotten good documentation. Most of the stories are probably just drunk fishermen. but I figured it was worth checking. I nodded, made notes on my dive slate. What depth am I looking at? Should be around 70 to 80 feet depending on the lake level. Won't be much to see. Just foundation stones. Maybe part of a wall if anything's left. The whole area's silted over pretty bad. I geared up. Dry suit, twin tanks with nitrox mix, 3 lights, camera system, backup everything. Technical diving is all about redundancy. You plan for equipment failure. You plan for the unexpected. Or at least, you think you do. The descent was normal. Clear water, good visibility, maybe 20 feet. The bottom came up gradually. Mud and silt, a few submerged trees, some old metal debris. I followed my compass, heading toward the coordinates, sweeping my primary light back and forth. At 72 feet, I found the first foundations, stone walls about 3 feet high, laid out in rectangles that had probably been houses or stores. Decades of silt had partially buried them. Small fish darted between the stones. I took photos, made measurements, marked waypoints on my dive computer. Nothing unusual. Just what you'd expect from a town that had been underwater for 80 years. I worked my way through the site systematically, documenting everything, following the pattern of streets that were now just gaps between the foundations. Then, at 78 feet, I found the church. It was standing, not collapsed, not demolished, not reduced to foundation stones. Standing intact, or mostly intact, rising up from the lake bed like it was waiting for Sunday morning services. The walls were there, the roof was there, even the front door was still in its frame. It was impossible. The historian had said it was demolished in the 1940s, but here it was, solid and real, covered in algae and zebra mussels, but unmistakably a church. My first thought was that the records were wrong, that the building had been left standing for some reason. It happens sometimes. Bureaucratic mistakes, buildings that fall through the cracks. I approached slowly, filming everything, my heart rate starting to climb. The architecture was right for the period. Simple clapboard construction, tall, narrow windows, a small steeple at the front. The wood should have rotted away decades ago, but it looked eerily preserved. I swam up to the front door. It was closed. The door handle was still there, brass turned green with corrosion. I reached out and pulled. The door opened smoothly, silently, and a cloud of silt swirled out. I should have turned around right then. Should have surfaced, told the historian what I'd found, come back with a team. But I was curious, and I was a professional, and I'd been in stranger situations. Or so I told myself. I adjusted my buoyancy and swam inside. The interior was intact, more than intact. It was furnished. Wooden pews in rows, facing toward where the altar would be. A pulpit at the front. Hymnals in the pew racks, their pages fused into solid masses of pulp but recognizable. The walls had what looked like framed paintings on them, the images long since bleached away by the water, but the frames still hanging. And someone was sitting in the front pew. A figure, sitting upright, hands folded in their lap, facing forward. At first, I thought it was a mannequin, or maybe someone's idea of a sick joke. But as I got closer, shining my light directly on it, I realized it was neither. It was a body. Or it had been a body, preserved somehow, mummified by the cold water and silt, still in position after 80 years. I'd seen bodies underwater before, drowning victims, accident casualties. They don't look like this. Bodies decompose fast in water, even cold water. Scavengers take them apart. This person, this thing, was intact. Skin like leather, stretched tight over bones. Clothing still visible, rotted but recognizable as what might have been Sunday dress. Hands folded, head bowed slightly, like they were praying. I moved closer, filming, my breath coming fast now, using up air faster than I should. The figure's head was tilted down, face hidden. I swam around to the side, trying to get a better angle with my camera. That's when the head lifted. Slowly, deliberately, turning toward me. I stopped breathing. Literally stopped, holding the air in my lungs, frozen in place. The face, if you could call it a face, was watching me. Empty eye sockets, jaw hanging open, but there was something in the sockets. Something that reflected my light back at me. Something that tracked my movement as I drifted sideways in the current. Then the mouth moved. Not falling open, not mechanical. It moved like it was trying to speak, jaw working up and down, and bubbles came out. Air bubbles, rising up past the algae-covered pulpit, past the rotted ceiling beams, up toward the surface, 80 feet above. How was there still air in this thing? How was it moving? How was any of this possible? I backed up, kicking hard, and my tank clanged against a pew behind me. The sound echoed through the church, a deep, hollow boom that shouldn't have been audible underwater. The figure stood up. I've been diving for 18 years. I know the physics. I know how bodies move underwater, how buoyancy works, how decomposition gases can cause movement. This wasn't that. This thing stood up smoothly, deliberately, its posture perfect, and it turned to face me fully. More bubbles came from its mouth. Steady, rhythmic, like breathing. Like it was alive down here. Had been alive down here for 80 years. Sitting in this impossible church in this flooded town, waiting. I ran, or swam as fast as I could out the door, away from the church, toward open water. My depth gauge showed 78 feet. My air was at 1,800 psi, plenty for a safe ascent, but I was breathing too fast and panicking. I forced myself to slow down, to check my computer, to do the safety stop at 15 feet like I'd been trained. The ascent took forever. I kept looking down, expecting to see something following me up from the depths, but there was nothing. Just dark water and silt clouds and the dim outline of the lake bed below. When I surfaced, the historian was waiting in the boat, excited. "Well, did you find it? Was the church there?" I pulled myself into the boat, stripped off my mask, tried to get my breathing under control. "It's there. It's standing, and there's something inside it." His expression changed. "What do you mean, something?" "A body, sitting in the front pew, and it moved. It stood up." He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. "You experienced nitrogen narcosis. It happens at depth. You start seeing things, feeling disoriented. I know what narcosis feels like. This wasn't that." "Did you get video?" I had. I'd kept filming even while backing away, even during those first few seconds of panic. I pulled the camera out of its housing, turned on the playback. The footage was there, the church exterior, the swim inside, the pews, the figure. I fast-forwarded to the moment the head lifted. The screen showed nothing. The pew was visible, the altar, the walls, but the figure wasn't there. Where it should have been sitting, there was just empty space. I went back to the earlier footage, the approach. Empty pew, no figure at all. "Camera malfunction," I said, but I didn't believe it. I'd seen it. I'd watched it move. The historian looked relieved. "You had a narcosis episode. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. The mind plays tricks at depth." I didn't argue. I took my pay, packed up my gear, drove home. But I couldn't let it go. The next week, I went back alone, different entry point, same coordinates. I found the church again easily. Swam inside again, more carefully this time, filming everything. The front pew was empty. No body, no figure, no evidence that anything had ever been there. The rest of the church looked the same, preserved, impossible, eerie. I documented it thoroughly, checked every corner, even looked behind the pulpit. Nothing. But when I reviewed the footage that night, there was someone in the pew again. Not in the video I'd taken underwater. That showed empty pews, just like the first dive. But in the footage I took after surfacing, when I'd panned the camera across the gear in my truck, something was visible in the reflection on my truck's window. A figure standing behind me, dripping water, wearing rotted clothing. I've been back to Kentucky Lake twice since then. Different locations, different dives, nowhere near Birmingham. but I keep seeing reflections. In my dive mask while descending, in the glass of my camera housing, in the surface of the water when I look up during safety stops. Always the same figure, always watching, always dripping, always silent. Last week, I was at home, in my bathroom, getting ready for work. I looked up at the mirror while brushing my teeth, and there it was, standing in the shower behind me, water running over it, even though I hadn't turned the shower on. I spun around. Nothing there. Looked back at the mirror. It was still visible in the reflection, closer now, reaching one hand toward me. I don't dive anymore. I can't. Because I know now that it doesn't matter where I am, 80 feet underwater or in my own bathroom. That thing from the church is still there, still watching, still following. It's in every reflection, every piece of glass, every surface that shows me something that shouldn't be there. I'm Owen, and I made the mistake of swimming into a church that shouldn't exist. I saw something that couldn't be alive, and somehow, by seeing it, I connected to it. Or it connected to me, and now it follows me everywhere, trapped in reflections, unable to cross over but never leaving. The historian published his book last month. He mentioned the church foundations, showed the photos I'd taken of the exterior. He didn't mention the figure didn't mention what I'd seen. He probably still thinks I imagined it, that I had narcosis or some psychological episode, but I know what I saw. And I know what I see now, every time I pass a mirror, every time I look at my phone screen, every time there's any surface that can show a reflection. It's there, always watching, always a little bit closer than it was before. Yesterday, I saw it in my laptop screen while working. It was standing right behind my chair. I could see its hand almost touching my shoulder in the reflection. I didn't turn around. I don't turn around anymore, because I know what I'll see, nothing but my empty room. But in every reflection, it's there, closer, patient, waiting. I think it wants me to come back, to swim back down to that church, to go back inside to sit in that front pew. I think it's been waiting there for 80 years, alone in the dark and cold, and now it knows someone finally came. Someone finally saw it, and it's not going to let me forget. The rotary phone in my grandmother's kitchen rang at 2:47 a.m., and when I answered, I heard voices from 1978 discussing tomorrow's church potluck. I'm Asher, and inheriting that remote West Virginia farmhouse taught me that some conversations never end, even when everyone involved has been dead for 47 years. My grandmother passed away in May, left me her place in Pocahontas County, 80 acres of mountain land with a 2-story farmhouse that hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. I'd visited as a kid, remembered it as isolated and creaky but charming in that old-timey way. When the lawyer handed me the keys, I figured I'd spend a couple weeks there, clean it out, decide whether to sell or keep it as a weekend place. The house was exactly as I remembered. Wood stove in the kitchen, floral wallpaper, ancient furniture, that particular smell old houses get. Everything covered in dust. I spent the first day just walking through, opening windows, making an inventory. That's when I noticed the phone. It was mounted on the kitchen wall, one of those old rotary dial models, beige plastic turned yellow with age. The cord was still plugged into the wall jack. I picked up the receiver out of curiosity, expecting nothing. The phone service should have been disconnected when my grandmother died. Instead, I got a dial tone, clear, strong, like the line was active. I hung up, unplugged it from the wall. Probably just residual current in the old wiring, some electrical quirk. I had bigger concerns. The plumbing needed work. The roof had some concerning stains, and the basement smelled like mildew. I made a list, called some local contractors, tried to get estimates. That night, sleeping in my grandmother's old bedroom upstairs, I woke to the sound of ringing. Not a cell phone ringtone, a real mechanical bell, the kind that makes that aggressive jangling sound. It took me a moment to place it. The kitchen phone. I checked my watch. 2:47 a.m. I went downstairs, groggy and confused. The phone was still unplugged, lying on the counter where I'd left it. But it was ringing. The bell inside was physically moving, making that sound, even though there was no power source. I stared at it for maybe 30 seconds, watching it ring, some part of my brain trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Then I picked it up. Hello? Voices. Multiple voices talking over each other, like I'd picked up in the middle of a group conversation. Women, mostly, discussing something about a church event. The quality was strange, not quite like a modern phone connection, but not static-filled either. Just slightly distant, slightly hollow. And Martha said she'd bring the potato salad, so we'll need... Has anyone heard from the family? I don't think they're... Tuesday at 7, but if the weather... I hung up, put the phone down carefully on the counter. My hands were shaking. I unplugged it again, even though it hadn't been plugged in. Went back to bed. Tried to convince myself I'd been dreaming, that I'd never actually gotten up, that the sound of the ringing had been part of some nightmare. The phone rang again at 2:47 the next night. Same time exactly. This time I didn't answer. I let it ring. 8 times, 9 times, 10. Eventually it stopped. I waited in the dark kitchen for 20 minutes, listening to the house settle, the refrigerator hum, the wind outside. Nothing else happened. The third night, I decided to answer again. Needed to know what this was, needed to understand. When the ringing started at 2:47, I picked up immediately. Hello? Who is this? The voices were clearer this time. I could make out individuals now, distinct speakers. 3 women, having a perfectly normal conversation about completely mundane things. Said his truck's been acting up again. Probably needs a new carburetor. Oh, I saw him at the store yesterday. He looked tired. Well, someone needs to check on them. Make sure they're... Excuse me, I said loudly. Who is this? How are you calling this number? The conversation stopped. Complete silence for maybe 5 seconds. Then one of the voices spoke directly, like she'd just realized someone new was on the line. Oh, honey, you must be new. Don't worry. You'll get used to sharing the line. That's just how party lines work. Party lines? What do you mean, party lines? You know, shared service. There's 5 of us on this line. Me, Dorothy, Linda, Sarah, and your grandmother. Well, 6 now, I suppose, if you're living in her house. My grandmother. She said my grandmother like she was still alive. Like she was just another neighbor on this shared phone line. My grandmother died 3 months ago, I said carefully. Oh, that's right. I heard about that. I'm sorry, dear. She was a lovely woman. So your family then, taking over the house? This didn't make sense. Party lines hadn't been used since the 70s, maybe early 80s at the latest. Modern phone systems don't work that way. What year is it? I asked. What kind of question is that? It's 1978, of course, June 15th, 1978. Are you feeling all right, dear? I hung up. Stood there in the kitchen staring at the phone. June 15th, 1978. The woman had said 1978 like it was obvious, like that was the current year, but it was 2025. I'd answered a phone that was somehow connected to a conversation happening 47 years ago. Or maybe, and this thought made my skin crawl, the conversation was still happening. Had always been happening. And my grandmother had been part of it, talking to these women on this party line, even though party lines stopped existing decades ago. I went to the county library the next day, looked through old records, found the phone directory from 1978. My grandmother's number was listed there, along with 4 other households with the same number and different ring codes. Party line service. I found death records too. Dorothy Sullivan, died 1983. Linda Marks, died 1991. Sarah Johnson died 1985. The woman who'd spoken to me, I never got her name. I couldn't find her in the records, but there were some entries too faded to read completely. That night, I unplugged the phone again and put it in the basement, closed the basement door, went to bed. At 2:47 a.m., I woke to ringing. It was muffled but unmistakable, coming from downstairs, through the floor, through the closed door. The phone in the basement was ringing. I didn't go down to answer it. Let it ring until it stopped. But the next morning, when I went to the basement, the phone wasn't where I'd left it. It was sitting on the kitchen counter again, plugged into the wall, like it had walked itself back up the stairs. That's when I started answering regularly, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to understand what was happening. Every night at 2:47, the phone would ring. Sometimes I'd answer and hear the same women talking about their lives in 1978, church events, local gossip, whose garden was doing well, who was sick, who needed help. Sometimes my grandmother's voice would be part of the conversation. Hearing her was the worst part. She sounded exactly like I remembered from childhood, before the dementia, before the years of decline. Vibrant, laughing, gossiping with her friends. Alive, but not alive. Something preserved, recorded, playing on an endless loop. "Grandmother," I said once, interrupting the conversation, "can you hear me?" There was a pause. Then her voice, uncertain. "Who's there? Is someone new on the line?" "It's me. It's your grandson." Another pause, longer this time. "I don't have a grandson yet. My daughter's only 16. Who is this?" She didn't know me, because in 1978, I didn't exist yet. My mother was a teenager. I wouldn't be born for another 15 years. Whatever this was, whoever I was talking to, they were trapped in that year, experiencing it as their present, unaware that the world had moved on without them. "I'm sorry," I said. "Wrong number." "That's all right, dear. Happens all the time on party lines." The conversations continued every night. I started recording them on my phone, documenting everything. The women talked about events I could verify in old newspapers. A storm that knocked out power, a local election, a car accident on Route 39. Everything they discussed matched historical records from June 1978. Then one night, the conversation changed, and I heard someone new moved into the old house. "Oh? Who?" "One of her grandchildren, I think. Young man. He's been asking strange questions." "What kind of questions?" "About what year it is. About whether we're... Well, it's just odd, that's all." They were talking about me. The women in 1978 were aware of me in 2025, discussing me as if I was a neighbor they'd heard about through local gossip. But that should have been impossible. They shouldn't have been able to perceive anything beyond their own time. "Hello?" I said. "I can hear it. Can you? I'm on the line." Silence. Then the woman's voice again, the same one who'd welcomed me that first night. "Oh, honey, you shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be able to hear us." "Why not? What is this?" "This is our line. This is our time. You're not supposed to cross over." "I'm not crossing anywhere. I'm just answering the phone in my house." "That's the problem, dear. It's not your house. It's hers. It's always been hers. And she won't let go." Before I could respond, I heard another voice. My grandmother, clearer than ever before. "Is someone using my phone? Who's in my house?" "Grandmother, it's me. I inherited the house. You died in May." "I'm not dead. I'm right here. I'm always here. I've always been here." And that's when I understood. My grandmother hadn't just used this phone line. She'd become part of it. Whatever party line service had existed in 1978, whatever connection had linked these households, she'd never let go of it. Even after the technology changed, even after the other subscribers died, even after her own death, she'd remained connected. Talking on her party line, existing in that preserved moment, unable or unwilling to move forward. The phone calls continued. Every night at 2:47. Sometimes it was the friendly conversation of neighbors. Sometimes it was my grandmother asking who was in her house, who was using her things, demanding that I leave. Sometimes the other women would apologize, say she'd been getting confused lately, say she'd been like this for years now. Years. They'd been having this same conversation, experiencing this same loop for 47 years of real time while living in a perpetual 1978. All of them trapped. All of them dead but still talking, still connected by this impossible phone line. Last week, I decided to cut the phone line completely. Disconnected it at the junction box outside, physically severed the wires. That night at 2:47, the phone rang anyway. I threw it in the creek that runs through the property, watched it sink into the water. At 2:47 the next night, I woke to find it on my nightstand dripping wet, ringing. I can't get rid of it. I've tried everything. The phone keeps coming back. The calls keep coming. And every night my grandmother's voice gets a little clearer, a little more insistent. She wants me to stay, wants me to join the party line, wants me to be part of that preserved moment in 1978, where she's still alive, still connected to her friends, still experiencing the world as it was before everything changed. Last night, when the phone rang, I answered and heard something different. Not a conversation, just breathing. And then my grandmother's voice, quiet and sad, "Don't you want to stay with me? Don't you want to be part of the family?" The other women are gone now. It's just her voice when I answer. Just her, alone on her party line, calling out into the void, desperate for someone to talk to. And she found me. Her grandson, who inherited her house, who answered. Her phone, who made the mistake of engaging with something that should have stayed disconnected. I'm Asher, and I can't leave this house. I've tried. Packed my car, loaded everything up, drove to the end of the driveway. But when I got to the main road, the phone started ringing. I could hear it from a mile away, impossibly loud, that aggressive, mechanical jangling cutting through everything else. I turned around, came back, unpacked. The phone is the only connection she has left. The only thing keeping her tethered to anything. And now it's the only thing keeping me here too. Every night at 2:47, I answer. I talk to her. I pretend it's 1978. I tell her about the weather, the garden, the neighbors she remembers. I become part of her party line, because I'm starting to understand that if I don't, if I stop answering, if I truly leave, she'll be completely alone, stuck in that moment forever with no one to talk to, no one to share the line with. And I can't do that to her, even if it means staying in this house in this time that isn't quite mine or hers, suspended between when she was alive and when I exist. The phone is ringing now. It's 2:47 a.m. She's calling, and I'll answer. I always answer, because that's what you do on a party line. You share, you connect, you become part of something that never ends, for better or worse. I'm starting to forget what year it is. When I look at my phone, my cell phone, it shows 2025. But when I look at the calendar on the wall, the one I found in the kitchen, it says June 1978. Both feel equally real now. Both feel equally true. Maybe that's how it starts. Maybe that's how you get trapped. You stop being sure which time is yours, which conversation is real, which voice on the other end of the line deserves your attention. And eventually you just stay on the call, forever. Part of the party line, part of the family. The phone is still ringing. I should answer. She's waiting. When I found the sealed root cellar beneath my great-uncle's abandoned homestead, I thought I'd discovered forgotten family history. I'm Felix, a property surveyor working in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And what I unearthed that October afternoon convinced me that some histories are buried for good reason. The job was supposed to be straightforward, measure and document the old family property so the estate could be divided among the heirs. My great-uncle had died at 93, leaving behind 80 acres of mountain land and a homestead that had been abandoned since the 1950s. The family hired me because I was kin and would work cheap. They wanted the survey done before winter made the mountain roads impassable. I'd never been to the property before. My great-uncle had been a recluse for the last 40 years of his life, lived alone in a trailer in Tennessee, refused visitors. The homestead had been his father's place, my great-great-grandfather's, built sometime in the 1890s. It had collapsed decades ago, just a pile of rotted logs and fieldstone now, slowly being reclaimed by the forest. The property was beautiful in that stark, isolated way mountain land can be. Steep ridges covered in hardwood forest, a creek running through the bottom, deer trails everywhere. I spent the first day establishing the property corners, using the old survey markers, taking GPS readings, making notes. The second day, I started documenting the structures. What was left of them? The main house was beyond salvage, just a depression in the ground where the foundation had been, timbers scattered like giant pickup sticks. The barn was in better shape, still partially standing though the roof had fallen in. I photographed everything, measured what I could, marked it all on my map. That's when I noticed the depression behind where the house had stood. It was roughly rectangular, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet, sunken about a foot lower than the surrounding ground. Leaves had filled it in, but when I kicked through them, I found stone, flat pieces of local slate laid in a pattern. A root cellar, had to be. Mountain families used them for food storage before refrigeration. Underground chambers, where the temperature stayed cool and constant year-round. Most were accessed through the house, a trapdoor in the kitchen floor leading down to stone steps. When the house collapsed, the cellar would have been sealed beneath the debris. I spent an hour clearing away leaves and rotted wood. The slate pieces formed a cover over the entrance, carefully fitted together. Someone had sealed it deliberately, not just let it get buried by the collapsing house. I could see where mortar had been used to cement the stones together. I shouldn't have opened it. Should have documented it and moved on, let someone else deal with it if they wanted. But I was curious, and I had a crowbar in my truck, and I told myself I needed to document what was inside for the survey report. The mortar was old and brittle. The stones came up easier than I expected, one at a time, revealing a dark opening beneath. The smell that came out was strange, not the musty, earthy smell I expected from an old cellar, but something else. Something sweet and chemical, like formaldehyde or preservative fluid. I got my flashlight from my truck, came back, and shone it down into the opening. Stone steps led down into darkness. The walls were mortared fieldstone, well built, the kind of craftsmanship you don't see anymore. I called down hello, listening for echoes, trying to gauge the size of the space. The echo suggested a larger chamber than I'd expected. Against my better judgment, I climbed down. The steps were solid, the stonework intact. At the bottom, I found myself in a room about 15 feet square, 7 feet high, the ceiling supported by rough-hewn beams. The floor was hard-packed dirt. And the room was full. Not full of stored potatoes or canned goods like I'd expected, full of glass jars. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, arranged on wooden shelves that lined 3 walls. Large mason jars, the kind used for canning, each one filled with liquid and containing something. I moved closer with my flashlight, trying to see what was preserved inside them. The first jar I examined contained what looked like tissue samples, small pieces of flesh or organ material floating in clear fluid. The jar was labeled in faded ink. Subject 7, liver, March 1897. The next jar held something similar. Subject 12, kidney, August 1897. Another. Subject 3, heart tissue, January 1898. I stepped back, my light sweeping across the shelves. Every jar was labeled. Every jar contained preserved biological specimens. This wasn't a root cellar. This was some kind of medical collection, samples taken from people, subjects, over a period of years in the late 1890s. Then I saw the journals. 3 leather-bound books sitting on a small desk in the corner. The desk itself covered in dust, but the journals looking oddly preserved, like they'd been protected from decay by the sealed environment. I picked up the first one, opened it carefully. The handwriting was precise, clinical, methodical. The entries were dated starting in January 1897. Subject 1 arrived today. Male, approximately 35 years of age. suffering from consumption. Agreed to treatment in exchange for room and board. Began experimental therapy with extract derived from local medicinal plants. Initial response promising. February 1896. Subject 1's condition deteriorating despite treatment. Respiratory failure inevitable. Have decided to harvest samples post-mortem for study. Subject 2 arrived. Female, age 27, advanced tuberculosis. Will attempt modified therapy. March 1897. Subject 1 expired at 3:17 a.m. Conducted immediate dissection to preserve organ tissue for analysis. Subject 2 responding poorly to treatment. Subject 3 arrived today via referral from county hospital. Desperate cases seeking experimental cure. I kept reading, my hand shaking, the flashlight beam unsteady. The journal documented a series of medical experiments conducted at this homestead over a period of 5 years, from 1897 to 1902. Patients with terminal illnesses, tuberculosis, consumption, various cancers, came seeking treatment from the person keeping these records, my great-great-grandfather. The entries grew progressively darker. Initial attempts at treatment gave way to simple observation of disease progression. Observation gave way to active experimentation, trying different compounds, different surgical interventions, seeing how long subjects survived under various conditions. The tone remained clinical throughout, detached, like the subjects were specimens rather than people. By 1900, the journal entries had changed in nature entirely. Growing conviction that the ailments afflicting these subjects are punishment for moral failings, disease as divine retribution, have begun screening subjects more carefully, accepting only those whose sins are grievous, whose suffering is deserved. In treating them, perhaps I serve as instrument of higher judgment. Subject 34 proved resilient, attempted experimental procedure without anesthesia to observe pain response. Subject expired after 6 hours, collected samples. Faith tells me this work serves purpose beyond mere scientific inquiry. These subjects are vessels of corruption. My work cleanses. I put the journal down, feeling sick. This wasn't medical research. This was torture disguised as treatment, justified by some twisted religious rationale. My great-great-grandfather had been killing people in this cellar for 5 years, documenting their deaths, preserving pieces of them in jars. The last journal entry was dated October 17, 1902. The work is complete. 47 subjects treated, observed, harvested. The collection is comprehensive. Future physicians may benefit from these preserved samples and detailed documentation. Have sealed the laboratory to preserve it. The house above will stand as a memorial to this research. No one must know the true nature of the work conducted here. It would not be understood. I looked at the shelves again with new understanding. 47 people, 47 individuals who came seeking medical help and instead found death in this underground chamber. Their organs preserved in formaldehyde, arranged like a museum collection, labeled and cataloged by the man who killed them. That's when I noticed the dates on the jars nearest to me. They didn't match the journal timeline. The last journal entry was 1902, but these jars were dated differently, more recently. Subject 48, lung tissue, November 2023. Subject 49, kidney, March 2024. Subject 50, liver, September 2024. My blood went cold. These weren't historical specimens. These were recent, last year, this year. Someone had been continuing the work, adding to the collection long after my great-great-grandfather's death. I heard something above me. Footsteps on the ground above the cellar, slow and deliberate. Someone walking around the collapsed homestead, moving toward the opening I'd left exposed. I killed my flashlight, pressed myself against the stone wall in the darkness. The footsteps stopped at the cellar entrance. A shadow blocked the light from above. Then a voice, old and rough. "Who's down there? Who opened the laboratory?" I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. My throat had closed up with fear. "I know someone's there. Saw your truck on the road. Surveyor, probably. Come up, let me see you. The voice was familiar somehow, old, patient, the tone of someone used to giving instructions that would be obeyed. The work isn't finished, the voice continued. 47 subjects documented. But the research continues. There's always more to learn, more to collect. Come up now, don't make this difficult. I looked around the cellar desperately. There had to be another way out. Root cellars sometimes had ventilation shafts or emergency exits. I swept my flashlight around quickly, keeping it low. There, on the far wall near the floor, a small opening maybe 2 feet square partially hidden behind the shelves. An old ventilation shaft or crawl space leading somewhere. The footsteps started down the stone steps, heavy boots moving carefully in the darkness. I'll find you whether you hide or not. This place has been my work for 70 years, since I was a boy helping my father, your great uncle. He taught me everything, how to identify subjects, how to make them disappear, how to preserve the specimens properly. My great uncle, the recluse, who'd lived alone for 40 years. He hadn't abandoned the homestead, he'd maintained it, kept the collection going, and he'd taught someone else, passed the work on before he died. I didn't wait to hear more. I scrambled toward the small opening, pushing aside jars, hearing them crash and break behind me. The chemical smell intensified. I squeezed into the crawl space, pulling myself forward on my elbows through dirt and roots. Behind me, a flashlight clicked on. You're making a mess. Breaking specimens it took decades to collect. Subject 51 will require extensive documentation to make up for this loss. I kept crawling. The space was barely big enough, dirt falling on my head, roots catching my clothes. After maybe 20 feet, I saw light ahead. A crack where the ventilation shaft emerged on the hillside behind the homestead. I pushed toward it, emerged gasping into the October afternoon, covered in dirt and spider webs. My truck was 50 yards away down the slope. I ran for it, not looking back, keys somehow still in my pocket. Got the door open, engine started, threw it in reverse. As I backed down the rutted driveway, I saw a figure emerge from the collapsed homestead, tall, thin, old, but moving with unsettling purpose. Watching me leave. Not chasing, not hurrying, just watching. I drove straight to the sheriff's office, told them everything. They listened politely, took notes, said they'd send someone to investigate. 2 deputies went up the next day. They found the collapsed homestead, found where I'd opened the cellar, found the broken jars. But the journals were gone. The remaining specimens were gone. The shelves had been cleared out, and there was no evidence anyone else had been there recently besides me. The deputies suggested I'd imagined the voice, that I'd gotten spooked in the dark cellar and panicked. The broken jars could have been old. The dates on the labels deteriorated and misread. My great-uncle had been dead for 6 months. There was no one maintaining the property. But I know what I saw. I know what I read. And I know someone is still out there, carrying on the work, adding to the collection, documenting subjects in leather journals just like their predecessor did. Last week, I got a phone call. Unknown number. When I answered, there was silence, then breathing. Then that same voice, old and patient. Subject 51, I've started your documentation. You saw the laboratory. You understand the work. When you're ready, I'll be waiting. The collection isn't complete without you. I've changed my number 3 times. He calls anyway. Always the same message. Always that patient certainty that eventually I'll go back, that I'll return to the homestead and complete my part in the work. I'm Felix, and I found something that should have stayed buried, something that's been continuing in secret for more than a century, passed down through generations of my family, maintained in that sealed cellar beneath the Blue Ridge Mountains. My great-great-grandfather started it. My great-uncle continued it, and someone else has it now, and they've marked me as Subject 51. Footsteps circled the metal platform above my tent all night, steady and deliberate, never stopping once. I'm Liam, a landscape photographer, documenting Appalachian wilderness. And when I climbed that decommissioned fire tower at dawn to find who'd been walking, I discovered observation logs detailing my every movement, written in a ranger's hand from 1987. The Monongahela National Forest covers nearly 1 million acres of West Virginia wilderness, most of it accessible only by rugged hiking trails or old logging roads. I'd been working on a photo series documenting abandoned infrastructure, old mines, railway trestles, forgotten homesteads, and the fire tower at Blackwater Ridge was supposed to be my final shot. The tower had been decommissioned in 1992, left to rust and decay after the Forest Service switched to aerial surveillance. According to the maps, it stood at the highest point on the ridge, accessible by a 3-mile trail that hadn't been maintained in decades. Perfect for the kind of atmospheric, haunting images I wanted. I hiked in late afternoon, arriving at the tower site with maybe an hour of daylight left. The tower was impressive. 40 feet tall, steel frame construction with a small glass-enclosed cabin at the top. The metal had oxidized to a deep orange-brown, and vegetation had started claiming the lower sections, but the structure looked solid. Stable enough to climb anyway. I set up my tent at the base of the tower, made dinner on my camp stove, took some preliminary shots in the golden hour light. The location was perfect, isolated, atmospheric, with views across miles of unbroken forest. I'd climb up in the morning, get interior shots of the cabin, capture the sunrise over the mountains. I was in my sleeping bag by 9, exhausted from the hike. The forest around me was alive with night sounds, insects, distant owls, wind through the trees, normal wilderness audio that I'd heard on dozens of camping trips. I drifted off easily. The footsteps started around midnight. Not loud but unmistakable, metal clanging, rhythmic and steady. Someone walking on the steel platform 40 feet above me, circling the cabin. Their pace was measured, deliberate. Walk to one corner, pause, walk to the next corner, pause. Like they were doing a patrol, checking all 4 sides methodically before starting the circuit again. I sat up in my tent, listening. The footsteps continued. Circle after circle, never stopping, never varying the pattern. I unzipped my tent, looked up at the tower. The cabin was dark, no lights visible, but the footsteps were definitely coming from up there. I could hear them clearly, the distinct ring of boots on steel grating. "Hello?" I called up. "Is someone there?" The footsteps didn't stop, didn't even pause, just continued their steady circuit. I grabbed my flashlight, shone it up at the platform. Nothing visible, just the dark silhouette of the cabin against the stars. But the footsteps kept going, overlapping with themselves now as I tried to track the sound. Walk, pause, circle after circle. I stayed awake for over an hour, listening. The pattern never changed. Finally, around 2 a.m. I put in earplugs and tried to sleep, the muffled clanging still audible even through the foam. When I woke at dawn, the footsteps had stopped. The forest was quiet except for morning birdsong. I made coffee, ate a protein bar, told myself there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe wind causing the platform to vibrate. Maybe thermal expansion and contraction of the metal making sounds that resembled footsteps. It was an old structure. All kinds of noises were possible. But I'd heard those footsteps. I'd heard them clearly, and I needed to know what had caused them. I gathered my camera equipment and started climbing the tower. The stairs were intact but corroded, and I tested each step carefully before putting my full weight on it. The climb took maybe 5 minutes, my breathing getting heavier as I ascended, the ground falling away below. At the top, I stepped onto the platform. It was maybe 8 feet square, surrounding the cabin on all sides with a railing that looked precarious. I walked the perimeter carefully, walked a corner, pause, walked to next corner, and my footsteps made that same distinctive clanging sound I'd heard all night. The cabin had 4 large windows, one on each wall, and a door on the north side. The door was padlocked, a modern lock, not original equipment, secured through a hasp that looked relatively new. Someone had locked this place up recently, within the last few years at least. I looked through the windows. The interior was maybe 10 by 10 feet, with a desk facing the east window, a chair, filing cabinets, and what looked like old communication equipment. Everything was covered in dust and bird droppings, but the space was intact. Preserved, almost, like a museum display of how fire towers had operated. And on the desk was a logbook, open, with fresh pages visible. I tried the door. Locked solid. I walked around to each window, looking for another way in. All the windows were intact, no way to enter without breaking glass. But I could see the logbook clearly through the east window, a large bound book lying open on the desk, pages covered in handwriting. I pressed my face to the glass, used my camera's telephoto lens to zoom in on the pages. The handwriting was neat, precise, in blue pen, and I could read some of the entries. October 14th, 2025, 1647. Subject arrived via South Trail. Male, approximately 30-35 years, carrying photography equipment and camping gear. Set up camp at Tower Base, Northeast Quadrant. Made dinner at 1822. Retired to tent at 2105. My blood went cold. That was yesterday. That was me. I zoomed in on more entries. October 15th, 2025, 012. Subject awake. Exited tent, looked up at tower, called out. No response given. Subject remained outside tent for approximately 8 minutes before returning inside. October 15, 2025, 02:15. Subject inserted earplugs, attempted to sleep. Success after 23 minutes. October 15, 2025, 06:33. Subject woke, made coffee, consumed meal. Currently preparing to ascend tower. Someone had been watching me all night, recording my movements, my actions, the exact times of everything I did. And they'd written it in this logbook that was locked inside a cabin that had been sealed for years. I looked around the platform, scanning the forest below. No one visible. No tents, no vehicles, no sign of another human being anywhere in the miles of wilderness surrounding the tower. "Who's there?" I shouted. "Who's been watching me?" Silence. Just wind and birds. I looked back through the window at the logbook. There were more entries above the ones about me, pages and pages of them, going back. I tried to see the dates. October 13th, October 11th, September 28th, all recent, all this year. But then I noticed something else. Next to the logbook was a smaller notebook, and on its cover, handwritten in faded marker, Fire Tower Log, Ranger Station 7, 1987. I used my camera to zoom in on pages in the older log that were partially visible. The handwriting was the same neat, precise script, same blue pen, entries from 1987 documenting something. Subject observed entering Sector 4. Subject established camp at 14:30. Subject remained stationary for 6 hours. The same person had been writing both logs. Someone who'd been a ranger here in 1987 when the tower was active, and who was still writing logs now in 2025, 38 years later. Still watching, still recording, still documenting subjects. People like me who came to this location. I backed away from the window, my heart hammering. This didn't make sense. The tower had been decommissioned, locked up. This cabin was sealed, but someone had been inside recently enough to write about me, to observe me all night, to record every movement I made. The footsteps started again, right behind me, on the platform. The same steady rhythm, walk, pause, circling around the cabin. But I was alone on the platform. I could see all 4 corners, all 4 sides. There was no one there. Just me and empty space and that steady, methodical clanging of boots on steel. I ran for the stairs, nearly fell, caught myself on the railing. The footsteps followed, staying always behind me, matching my pace as I descended. I could hear them above me, still on the platform, still circling, but also on the stairs, with me, right behind me, close enough that I should have been able to feel someone's breath on my neck. I hit the ground running, grabbed my tent, didn't bother packing it properly, just stuffed it in my pack, grabbed my gear, started down the trail at a near sprint. The footsteps stopped following once I was maybe 50 yards from the tower, but I didn't slow down. I hiked all 3 miles back to where I'd parked my truck, threw everything in the back, drove away without looking back. When I got home, I developed the photos I'd taken. The shots of the tower exterior turned out fine, atmospheric, moody, exactly what I'd wanted. But the shots I'd taken through the window, the ones where I'd zoomed in on the logbook, they showed something different. The pages were blank, not just empty, completely white, like fresh paper that had never been written on. The desk was there, the chair was there, the file cabinets were there, but there was no logbook, no 1987 log, nothing but empty white pages in a book that should have had my name in it. I reported what happened to the Forest Service. They listened politely, sent someone to check the tower. The cabin was locked, they confirmed. Same lock that had been there since 1992 when they decommissioned it. No one had been inside since then, they were certain. The lock was intact. The cabin was sealed. There was no evidence of recent occupation. Sometimes sounds echo strangely in the mountains, the ranger told me. Acoustic anomalies, wind patterns that create rhythmic noises. And after a long day hiking, exhaustion can make people hear things that aren't there. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw through that window, and I know someone, or something, has been watching that tower for 38 years, documenting everyone who comes there, writing their observations in a logbook that shouldn't exist. Last week, I got an email. No sender name, no subject line, just an attachment, a scanned page from a logbook. The entry was dated October 15th, 2025. Subject fled tower at 7:03. Displayed signs of extreme distress. Subject will not return. Observation concluded. Adding to archive. Total subjects documented at this location, 247. Below that, in the same neat handwriting, new subject expected November 3rd, 2025. Young male, mid-20s, hiking solo. Subject will arrive via North Trail at approximately 15 gas. Will maintain observation protocol. Tower log continues. I'm Liam, and I found an abandoned fire tower that isn't really abandoned. Someone, or something, is still watching from that glass cabin, still recording, still documenting subjects. The rangers from 1987 were supposed to watch for fires. But whoever writes those logs now is watching for something else. Watching people, recording them, adding them to an archive that's been growing for decades. And according to that email, they're expecting someone new, some hiker who's planning to visit Blackwater Ridge next month. Someone who has no idea they're about to become subject number 248. And there's nothing I can do to warn them, because I don't know who they are. The tower is still there, still locked, still waiting. And every night at midnight, the footsteps start their circuit. Circling, watching, recording everything below. A watcher who never stops, never rests, never leaves their post, even 38 years after their shift was supposed to end. The valley floor rose 6 inches beneath my boots and fell again, a slow rhythmic motion like a sleeping giant's chest. I'm Nora, a seismologist working for the U.S. Geological Survey, and when our instruments confirmed the breathing had been consistent for 2 centuries and was now accelerating, I understood why the Cherokee had warned never to be there when the mountain wakes. We'd been dispatched to the Cumberland Gap region after local rangers reported unusual seismic readings in an unnamed valley about 15 miles northeast of the main gap. Not earthquakes exactly, but regular vibrations. Too consistent, too rhythmic to be natural tectonic activity. My team consisted of myself, 2 graduate students, and a technician. Standard geological survey. Set up instruments, take measurements, file a report explaining the anomaly. We hiked in on a Thursday morning in early October, carrying our equipment in backpacks and on a small cart we'd modified for rough terrain. The valley wasn't on any official maps, just marked as unnamed watershed on the USGS charts. Local hunters avoided it, the ranger had said. Bad feeling about the place. Stories passed down from the Cherokee who'd lived in the area for thousands of years. The valley was maybe a mile long and half a mile wide, oriented north-south, surrounded by steep ridges covered in oak and hickory. The floor was mostly level, covered in grass and scattered with limestone outcroppings. A small stream ran down the center, barely more than a trickle. Nothing obviously unusual. We set up our base camp at the south end, near the tree line. The graduate students started assembling the seismometers, while I did a preliminary survey with a handheld GPS unit, marking elevations, noting geological features. The technicians set up the data recorders and solar panels. It was around noon when I first felt it. I was standing near the center of the valley, about 50 yards from camp, marking a limestone outcropping on my tablet. The ground beneath my feet moved. Not violently, just a gentle rising, maybe 4 or 5 inches, then a slow settling back down, like standing on something soft that was compressing and expanding. I stood still, waiting to feel it again. 20 seconds passed. Then the ground rose again, held for a moment, descended. Another 20 seconds, rise and fall, perfectly regular. "You feeling this?" I called to the team. One of the graduate students looked up from the seismometer. "Feeling what?" "The ground. It's moving." She walked over, stood next to me. We waited. The ground rose beneath us, fell again. Her eyes went wide. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know, but we're here to find out." We spent the afternoon setting up a grid of instruments across the valley floor. Seismometers, GPS stations, ground-penetrating radar, everything we had. The movement was consistent. A rise of approximately 6 inches, a fall of 6 inches, occurring every 20 seconds with almost metronomic precision. The entire valley floor, roughly half a square mile of surface area, was moving up and down in perfect synchronization. The data was impossible. Our instruments showed the movement clearly, vertical displacement of 15 centimeters every 20 seconds, affecting the entire valley uniformly. But there was no seismic source, no underground cavity that could cause such motion, no gas pocket or water table fluctuation that would explain it. The bedrock beneath the valley was solid Mississippian limestone, hundreds of feet thick, resting on even older formations. There was no mechanism for what we were observing. "Could it be our instruments?" the technician asked. "Some kind of calibration error?" "Not across 5 different seismometers and 3 GPS units," I said. "They're all showing the same thing. The ground is actually moving." That evening, I went through the historical data we'd brought. The unusual readings had first been noted in the 1970s by a geology professor from the University of Kentucky. He'd documented the movement, published a brief paper about it, then apparently dropped the research. I found his notes in the archived data. He'd measured the same thing we were seeing, but at a different rate. In 1973, the valley floor was rising and falling every 30 seconds, not 20. The rhythm was accelerating. I pulled up older records. A land survey from 1889 mentioned peculiar ground instability in the valley. A report from a Tennessee militia unit passing through in 1812 noted that their horses refused to enter the valley, and several men reported feeling seasick from the rolling of the earth underfoot. Going back further, I found a journal entry from 1750 by Dr. Thomas Walker, one of the first English explorers of the region. He'd met with Cherokee guides who told him about a valley they called Yunwi-Sunsti, the place where the mountain dreams. They'd warned him never to camp there, never to linger when the breathing became rapid. The breathing, he'd written. They speak of it as a living thing, the earth itself breathing as a man sleeps. They say it has breathed thus since before their grandfather's time, and that one day it will wake. I showed the historical data to my team around the campfire that night. "Look at the pattern," I said. 1750, the Cherokee say it's been breathing for generations. Let's call that at least 200 years, probably longer. 1812, the rhythm is noticeable enough that soldiers comment on it. 1889, documented as ground instability. 1973, measured at 30-second intervals. Today, 20 seconds. The breathing is getting faster. How much faster? One of the students asked. I'd run the calculations. If the acceleration continues at the current rate, the interval will drop to 10 seconds by next year, 5 seconds within 5 years. At some point, the motion stops being a gentle rise and fall and becomes something else, something violent. That's assuming the acceleration is linear, the other student said. It could level off, reach some kind of equilibrium. Or it could be exponential, I said. In which case, we're looking at a much faster timeline. Weeks or months, not years. We slept in our tents that night, and I barely slept at all. The breathing was constant, inescapable. 20 seconds of stillness, then the ground would rise beneath my sleeping bag, lifting me gently, then lowering me back down. Again and again, all night long. Like being rocked by something enormous and patient, something that had been doing this for centuries and would continue long after we were gone. Except it wouldn't continue at this pace. It was accelerating, waking up. The next morning, Friday, I measured the interval again. 19 seconds. It had dropped a full second overnight. We need more instruments, I told the team. Core samples, ground-penetrating radar at maximum depth. I want to know what's under this valley. We worked all day Friday and Saturday, drilling cores, running radar surveys, taking samples. The valley was solid rock beneath maybe 30 feet of soil and alluvium. No caves, no voids, no gas pockets, nothing that could explain the movement. The radar showed the limestone layers rising and falling in synchronization with the surface, as if the entire geological formation, millions of tons of rock, was moving as a single unit. It's like something is breathing beneath the rock, the technician said. Like there's something alive down there, and we're standing on its chest. By Saturday evening, the interval had dropped to 18 seconds, still declining steadily. I called my supervisor at USGS, explained what we were seeing. He was skeptical until I sent him the data files, then he went silent for a long time. How stable is this? He finally asked. Unknown. But it's been going on for at least 200 years, probably much longer. And it's accelerating. If it continues at this rate, I'll send more equipment and more personnel. This needs a full research team. But Nora, you need to be careful. If that movement becomes unstable, if you get caught in some kind of seismic event, I know, we're monitoring constantly. If anything changes dramatically, we'll evacuate immediately. Sunday morning, the interval was 17 seconds. The movement felt stronger now, more pronounced. Not just 6 inches anymore, closer to 8. The rhythm was becoming more forceful, like whatever was beneath us was straining harder with each breath. The graduate students wanted to leave. I didn't blame them. But we needed more data. Needed to understand what we were dealing with before we abandoned the site. I convinced them to stay through Monday, promised we'd leave first thing Tuesday regardless of what we'd found. Monday was when things got worse. I woke at dawn to find the interval had dropped to 15 seconds. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the sound. Each time the ground rose, I could hear it now, a deep, rumbling resonance, like distant thunder, or the lowest note of an organ vibrating up through the bedrock. It wasn't loud, but it was pervasive, felt more than heard, making my chest vibrate with each cycle. We're leaving, one of the students said. This isn't safe. Whatever this is, we shouldn't be here. I almost agreed, but then I thought about what would happen if we left without understanding it. This thing, this breathing, was accelerating toward something, toward waking up. And if we didn't figure out what it was, what would happen when it did wake? How many people lived within range if this became an earthquake, a volcanic eruption, some kind of geological catastrophe we didn't have a name for yet? One more day, I said. 24 hours. Then we leave no matter what." They agreed reluctantly. We spent Monday taking readings every hour, documenting everything. The interval continued dropping. 14 seconds by noon, 13 by late afternoon. The sound was getting louder, and now there was something else. Vibration. The kind you feel in your bones, subsonic frequencies that made your teeth ache and your stomach queasy. Around 8 p.m., the technician came running from his instrument station. "You need to see this. The movement isn't just vertical anymore, there's lateral displacement. The whole valley is shifting east-west, maybe an inch per cycle, synchronized with the breathing. Lateral movement meant shear stress, meant the rock formations were sliding against each other, meant we were potentially sitting on top of something that could generate a major earthquake if it continued escalating." "We're done," I said. "Start packing. We leave first thing in the morning, before dawn." But we didn't leave at dawn, because at 3:17 a.m. on Tuesday, I woke to find the interval had dropped to 8 seconds. 8 seconds between breaths. The ground was rising and falling like a piston now, and the sound was no longer subtle. It was loud, a deep bass rumble that shook our tents, that made the water in our bottles ripple with each cycle, and then it changed. The rhythm broke. Instead of the steady up-down pattern, there was a longer rise. The ground lifted, held for 5 seconds, then dropped suddenly, harder than before. A pause, then another long rise, hold, drop. The pattern was changing, becoming irregular, like something shifting in its sleep, on the edge of waking. "Everyone out," I shouted. "Grab what you can, we're evacuating now." We threw essentials into packs, left the expensive instruments where they stood, started hiking south toward the tree line by flashlight and the first hints of dawn. The valley floor was heaving beneath us now, the rhythm completely irregular, sometimes 3 seconds between movements, sometimes 10, unpredictable and violent. We were maybe 200 yards from the valley edge when the ground stopped moving entirely. Complete stillness. No motion, no sound, just silence and the pale dawn light, filtering through the trees ahead of us. We stopped, waiting. Nothing happened. The valley was perfectly still for the first time since we'd arrived. One of the students started to speak, and I held up my hand for silence. We stood there for maybe 30 seconds. Then I felt it. Not a movement, but a presence. An awareness. Like when you're in a dark room and you suddenly know someone else is there with you, even though you can't see or hear them. The valley had stopped breathing, because it was awake. The ground moved then, but not like before. Not a gentle rise and fall. It moved like something twisting, writhing, trying to reshape itself. The limestone outcroppings we'd been studying cracked and shifted. The stream in the center of the valley reversed direction, flowing uphill for 10 seconds before resuming its normal course. The grass beneath our feet turned brown and died in seconds, as if something was drawing all the life out of the soil. We ran the last 200 yards, reached the tree line, and kept going. Didn't stop until we were at the top of the ridge, half a mile from the valley floor. From up there, we could see it clearly in the growing daylight. The valley was moving like a living thing, the surface undulating in waves, the stream writing patterns that didn't obey physics or hydrology. And at the center, something was forming. The ground was pushing upward, building a mound maybe 50 feet high, like something beneath was trying to break through. We hiked out, didn't speak until we reached the ranger station 6 hours later. Called it in, got evacuated by helicopter that afternoon. A research team arrived the next day, but they couldn't get within half a mile of the valley. The ground was too unstable, moving in waves that made it impossible to stand upright. Satellite imagery showed the mound at the center continuing to grow, now over 100 feet high. As of 2 weeks ago, the valley has been closed indefinitely. The USGS has classified it as an ongoing geological anomaly of unknown origin. The Cherokee were consulted, the few remaining tribal elders who still remember the old stories. They say the breathing will stop soon, that the mountain has nearly finished waking. And when it does, when whatever is beneath that valley finally breaks through, after dreaming for tens of thousands of years, we'll learn what the warnings meant. I'm Nora, and I'm supposed to write a report explaining what we observed. But how do you explain the impossible? How do you tell people that there's something alive beneath the Cumberland Gap, something that's been sleeping since before humans walked this continent, and we just measured it waking up? The Cherokee have a name for it. Uktana, an ancient serpent, massive beyond comprehension that sleeps beneath the mountains. In the old stories, they say, when Uktana wakes, the mountains themselves will dance. I always thought it was metaphor. Now I know better. And I know we don't have much time to figure out what to do when a creature the size of a mountain range decides to wake up after 200,000 years of dreaming. The breathing has stopped. The valley is still. But something is coming. 3 years of night runs on Route 19, and I'd seen them exactly 247 times, always 7 figures in a line, always at mile marker 31. I'm Silas, a long-haul trucker working the Asheville to Murphy route. And the night I finally stopped to help those hitchhikers, I watched my headlights pass through them like they were made of smoke. Route 19 through the Nantahala National Forest is a trucker's nightmare. 2 lanes twisting through mountain gorges, no cell service for 30 miles, barely wide enough for 2 vehicles to pass. I run it 5 nights a week, leaving Asheville at 11 p.m., delivering to Murphy by 4 a.m., then back again. 3 years I've been doing this route. 3 years I've been seeing them. The first time was in October 2022, maybe 2 months after I started the route. Mile marker 31, right where the road hugs the cliff face above the Nantahala River. My headlights caught them, 7 people standing in a line on the shoulder facing the road. Hitchhikers, I thought. But at 2 a.m. in the middle of nowhere, and there were 7 of them, perfectly spaced, not moving, just standing there watching the road. I didn't stop. You don't stop for strangers on a mountain highway at 2 a.m., especially not 7 of them appearing out of nowhere. I passed them doing maybe 40, the road's too twisty for more, and got a good look as my lights swept over them. They were wearing old clothes. Not vintage, not costume. Genuinely old, like from the 1970s or earlier. Bell-bottoms on some of them, long skirts on others. One wore what looked like a military jacket. They didn't wave, didn't move, just stood there in that perfect line. When I checked my mirrors, they were gone. Just empty road behind me, trees and darkness. I saw them again 3 nights later. Same spot, same formation, same clothes. This time I slowed down more, got a better look. The one on the left end was young, maybe early 20s, with long hair. The one on the right end was older, might have been 50 or 60. The others were various ages in between. They weren't looking at each other, weren't talking, just standing there, facing the highway like they were waiting for something specific. I called it in on the CB radio once I got back into range. Anyone else see those people at mile marker 31, 7 of them standing on the shoulder? Static for a moment, then a familiar voice. Another driver who ran the route regularly. The 7. Yeah, they're always there. Been seeing them for years. Nobody knows what their deal is. Years? How long? Hell, I've been seeing them since the 90s. Always the same 7, always in that line. Other drivers see them too. It's just one of those things about this route. That should have bothered me more than it did. But when you drive the same route night after night, the weird becomes normal. The 7 people at mile marker 31 became part of my routine. I'd come around that curve, my headlights would find them, I'd pass them, they'd disappear in my mirrors, every single run, without fail. I started keeping a log, noted every time I saw them, what they were wearing, their positions. The data was consistent, 7 people, always the same 7, in the same order from left to right. Young guy with long hair, woman in a floral dress, man in bell-bottoms, woman in a long skirt, man in the military jacket, older woman in slacks, older man in what looked like a suit jacket. Same formation, Same spot, every time. Other drivers confirmed it. We'd talk on the CB, compare notes. One guy said he'd been running Route 19 for 20 years and had seen them the entire time. Another said her father had driven this route in the 80s and had told her about the 7 before she ever saw them herself. There were stories going back to at least the 70s. Always the same group, always the same formation, always at mile marker 31. Some drivers refused to run the route anymore because of them, said it was too creepy, too wrong. Others just accepted it as part of the job. You see strange things driving at night. Fog does weird things. Exhaustion plays tricks on your eyes. Most of us convinced ourselves there had to be a rational explanation, even if we couldn't figure out what it was. I made it 3 years, seeing them multiple times a week without stopping. Then last Thursday, changed everything. I was running late that night. Mechanical issues had delayed me by an hour. It was almost 3 a.m. when I approached mile marker 31, and I was tired, more tired than usual. My headlights found them right where they always were, 7 figures in a line. But this time, as I got closer, I saw something different. The young guy on the left end had his arm raised. He was waving. Actually waving, trying to flag me down. In 3 years, I'd never seen them move. Never seen them do anything but stand there. Now one of them was waving, and the gesture was so human, so normal, that without thinking, I started slowing down. By the time my rational mind caught up and told me this was a bad idea, I was already pulling onto the shoulder, my air brakes hissing, the truck shuddering to a stop maybe 30 feet past them. I sat there for a moment, engine idling, trying to decide what to do. The smart thing would be to drive away. But something kept me there. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the fact that after 3 years of seeing them, I wanted answers. I grabbed my flashlight, opened the door, climbed down from the cab. The night was cool, quiet except for the river running below and my truck's engine. I walked back toward where I'd stopped, flashlight in hand. They were still there, still in their line, maybe 20 feet from my truck. The young guy had his arm down now, but they were all facing me, watching me approach. "You folks need help," I called out. My voice sounded strange in the empty night, too loud. They didn't answer, just stood there watching me. I took a few steps closer, raised my flashlight. The beam passed over them, and that's when I saw it, or rather didn't see it. My flashlight cast a bright cone of light across the road, illuminating the pavement, the trees beyond, everything. Everything except them. The light passed through them, like they weren't there. Where each person stood, there should have been a shadow behind them. There wasn't. The light went straight through their bodies and hit the trees beyond as if nothing was blocking it. I stopped walking. Stood there with my flashlight raised, watching the impossible. They were solid-looking, clearly visible in my truck's headlights and my flashlight beam, but they cast no shadows. The light passed through them. "What are you?" I asked. My voice was shaking. The young guy on the left, the one who'd waved, spoke. His voice was clear but strange, like it was coming from slightly the wrong direction. "We've been waiting." Waiting for what? For someone to stop. For someone to see us properly. It's been so long since anyone stopped. The woman in the floral dress spoke next. "We've been here since 1976. September 14th, 1976. Do you know what happened that night?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. The man in the military jacket continued. "There was an accident. A van coming down from Asheville, coming too fast on these curves. We were heading to a wedding in Murphy, all 7 of us in one van. The driver lost control at this curve. We went through the guardrail, over the cliff, into the river. The older woman in slacks. They found the van 3 days later, found all 7 of us inside, but by then we were already here, standing on the shoulder, watching the road. My flashlight was still passing through them. I could see every detail, their faces, their clothes, the way their hair moved slightly in the wind. But the light didn't interact with them at all. They were there and not there simultaneously. "We don't know why we're here," the older man in the suit jacket said. We don't know why we can't leave. We just know that we stand here, night after night, watching the cars pass. Most people don't see us, but some do, like you. I've seen you hundreds of times, I said. 3 years, 5 nights a week. We know. We've seen your truck. We see every vehicle that passes. We've been counting. 49 years, 2 months, 17 days, thousands of cars, hundreds of drivers who see us, but almost no one stops. The young guy who'd waved spoke again. We wanted someone to know, to remember us, to know that we were real people once. We had names, families, lives. We were going to a wedding. We were laughing about something stupid right before the crash. And then we were here, standing on this shoulder, and we've been here ever since. I wanted to ask their names, to write them down, to do something. But before I could speak, the woman in the floral dress said, "You should go. You shouldn't have stopped. Now that you have, now that you've seen us properly, you're part of it, too." Part of what? The route, the pattern. Once you stop, once you truly see us, you become connected to this place, to this moment. You'll never be able to drive this road without seeing us. And someday, when your time comes, you might end up here too, standing on this shoulder, waiting for someone to stop. My blood went cold. You're saying I'm going to die on this road? We don't know, the older woman said. We don't know how it works. We just know that the people who stop, who really see us, they always come back. They can't stay away. The route pulls them back. And eventually, she didn't finish the sentence. I backed away, my flashlight still passing through them uselessly. I'm leaving. I'm never coming back on this route. You'll be back, the young guy said, not threatening, just stating a fact. You'll try to stay away, but you'll come back. They all do. I ran back to my truck, climbed in, slammed the door, put it in gear, and pulled away from the shoulder, my wheels kicking up gravel. In my mirrors, I could see them standing there, in the same line, watching my taillights disappear around the curve. I called my dispatcher the next morning, told them I was done with the Route 19 run. They reassigned me to different routes, Asheville to Knoxville, Knoxville to Atlanta, anywhere but that stretch of mountain highway. I told myself I'd never drive Route 19 again. That was 12 days ago. Tonight, I'm sitting in my truck at the Flying J in Asheville. It's 10:45 p.m. My manifest says I'm supposed to head east to Raleigh, but I've been sitting here for an hour, and all I can think about is Route 19, about mile marker 31, about 7 people standing in a line, watching the road, waiting. I don't want to go. Every rational part of my brain is screaming at me to start the engine, head east, stick to my assigned route. But something else, something deeper, is pulling me west, toward Route 19, toward the Nantahala, toward that curve at mile marker 31. I checked the accident reports from September 1976, found it easily. 7 people killed when their van went off Route 19 near the Nantahala River. Names listed: David Morrison, age 22, Jennifer Hayes, age 28, Michael Torres, age 31, Sarah Chen, age 29, Robert Bobby Sullivan, age 45, Patricia Morrison, age 58, James Morrison, age 62, a family plus friends, heading to a wedding, never arrived. They've been there for 49 years, standing in that line, watching thousands of vehicles pass, seen by hundreds of drivers but never helped, never released, never allowed to leave. And now I'm part of it, part of whatever holds them there. The woman was right. I can't stay away. The route is pulling me back. I can feel it like a physical force, a magnet drawing me west through the mountains. It's 11:03 p.m. now. I'm starting the engine. I'm going to head west on Route 19. I'm going to drive through the Nantahala. I'm going to pass mile marker 31, and I'm going to see them again. 7 figures in a line, standing on the shoulder in their 1976 clothes, waiting for someone to stop, waiting for someone to join them. I'm Silas, and I made the mistake of stopping for the windshield people. Now I can't leave this route. I'll drive it over and over, passing them every night, watching my headlights pass through them like smoke. Until one night, maybe tonight, maybe years from now, I won't pass them. I'll join them. I'll become the 8th person in that line, standing on the shoulder of Route 19, wearing my trucker's jacket and jeans, watching the vehicles pass, waiting for someone to stop. The route has me now, and it won't let go. Mile marker 31 is calling. I have to go. Something was wrong with the memories flooding my head. They were too sharp, too real, and they all ended with someone dying by my hands. I'm Cade, a kayak guide working the East Tennessee rivers, and 3 days ago I found an abandoned, still running perfectly in a hidden cove, tasted one sip of its product, and now I'm remembering murders I never committed but feel compelled to finish. I'd been guiding on the Little River and its tributaries for 5 years. Thought I knew every bend, every put-in, every hidden spot where the tourists never ventured. Then last Tuesday, a client canceled last minute, and I decided to explore a side channel I'd noticed but never investigated, barely wide enough for my kayak, overgrown with laurel and rhododendron, the kind of place that whispers "keep out" in a language older than words. The channel opened into a cove, maybe 30 yards across, ringed by steep cliffs covered in old-growth hemlocks. The water was mirror still, reflecting the trees like dark glass, and at the back of the cove, built into a natural overhang in the cliff face, was a structure that shouldn't have been there. It was a moonshine operation. A still, copper coils, condensers, fermentation barrels, all of it set up with the kind of precision that spoke of decades of practice. But it was old. The copper had that deep patina that takes 50 years to develop. The wood barrels were weathered gray. Everything about it screamed abandoned decades ago, except it was running. I could hear the gentle bubbling of mash fermenting, could see condensation on the copper coils, could smell that sweet, sharp scent of corn liquor in the making. The fire pit beneath the still had fresh coals, still warm enough that I could feel heat radiating from them when I pulled my kayak up onto the narrow strip of rocky shore. I'm not stupid. I know moonshining still happens in these mountains, that there are families who've been running stills since before Prohibition and never stopped. Finding an active operation meant I'd stumbled onto someone's illegal business, and the smart thing would be to leave immediately and forget I'd ever seen it. But the place was completely deserted. No footprints in the mud except where I'd pulled up my kayak. No sounds except the bubbling mash and distant birdsong. No signs that anyone had been here recently except for those warm coals, and even those looked wrong, like they'd been burning steadily for days without anyone tending them. I walked closer to the still. Everything was perfectly maintained, everything in its exact right place. Mason jars were lined up on a rock shelf, filled with clear liquid. I picked one up, held it to the light. Crystal clear, no impurities visible. The kind of quality shine that you'd only get from someone who really knew their craft. There was a piece of paper wedged under the jar, yellowed and brittle. I pulled it out carefully. The writing was in pencil, faded but still legible. Property of J. Sullivan. Touch this, and you answer to me. Touch what's mine, and pay the price. The handwriting was old-fashioned, formal. The paper looked like it was from the 1970s or earlier, but the jar was sitting on fresh moss, and the liquid inside looked newly distilled. I should have put it down, should have walked away. But I was hot from the paddle, thirsty, and curious about what decades-old moonshine would taste like. Just one sip, I told myself. One taste to see what all the fuss was about. I unscrewed the lid, took a small sip. It burned going down. Good shine always does. But there was something else. A taste beneath the alcohol, metallic and strange like copper and old blood. And the moment it hit my stomach, my vision went white. I was standing in this same cove, but it was night. The still was newer, the copper bright and shining. And I was angry, furious about something, a rage so intense it felt like my chest would burst. Someone had betrayed me. Someone had told the revenuers where my still was located, and I knew who. I saw myself, No, saw Jay Sullivan, because these were his memories, his hands, his fury. I saw him waiting by the still with a hunting rifle, waiting for the betrayer to come, waiting to make them pay. I came back to myself, gasping, the jar still in my hand, my kayak drifting slightly in the current. What the hell was that? A hallucination? Some kind of contamination in the moonshine? I put the jar back, got in my kayak, paddled out of that cove as fast as I could. My hands were shaking. The memory, Sullivan's memory, had felt more real than my own life. I could still feel his rage, still see through his eyes, still sense that overwhelming need for revenge. That night, lying in bed in my cabin outside Townsend, the memories came back, but stronger, more detailed. Sullivan waiting in the dark, the betrayer arriving, a younger man, maybe a nephew or cousin, someone close, words exchanged, denials, lies, and then Sullivan raising the rifle, the younger man backing away, pleading, the shot echoing across the water, the body falling, Sullivan dragging it to the water, weighting it with stones from the shore, pushing it into the deepest part of the cove where it would never be found. I woke up screaming, covered in sweat. But the memory didn't fade like a nightmare. It stayed sharp, crystalline, more vivid than my own memories of yesterday. I could remember the weight of the rifle, the look on the younger man's face, the sound the body made hitting the water. I could remember it because Sullivan remembered it. And somehow, that sip of moonshine had transferred his memories to me. The next day, I tried to work. Had a group trip scheduled on the little river. But the memories kept intruding. I'd be explaining paddling techniques, and suddenly I'd be back in Sullivan's head, watching him kill the betrayer. I'd be pointing out wildlife, and I'd flash to Sullivan disposing of the body, making sure it would never surface, never be found. By the end of the day, I'd nearly capsized twice because the memories were so overwhelming. The clients complained. My boss asked if I was okay. I said I was fine, just not feeling well. Went home early. That night, the memories escalated. Sullivan killed 3 more people over the next 2 years. A revenue agent who'd gotten too close to finding the still. A rival moonshiner who tried to move in on his territory. A woman who'd seen too much and threatened to talk. Each killing was methodical, careful, designed to leave no trace. Each body went into the cove, weighted with stones, hidden in the dark water beneath the surface. But the 4th killing went wrong. Sullivan had gotten old. His hands weren't as steady. The man fought back, got the rifle away from him, turned it around. Sullivan died there at his own still, shot with his own weapon, his blood seeping into the soil where the mash was fermenting. And as he died, he made a promise to himself. He wasn't finished. He had one more person to kill, one final betrayer who'd reported him to the law. And somehow, some way, he was going to complete what he'd started. I woke up knowing 2 things with absolute certainty. Sullivan's spirit was bound to that moonshine, waiting for someone to drink it and become his vessel. And he wanted me to complete his final killing, wanted me to find the last betrayer and finish what he'd started in 1978. The problem was, I was starting to want it too. Sullivan's rage was becoming my rage. His memories were replacing mine. I'd catch myself thinking in his voice, seeing through his eyes, feeling his overwhelming need for revenge as if it were my own emotion. I tried to research Sullivan, found old newspaper articles about bootleggers in the area, about a still that had been discovered in 1978 after an anonymous tip led authorities to it, found an obituary for Jacob Sullivan, age 62, died of a gunshot wound under suspicious circumstances. The case had never been solved, no arrests made, and I found a name in the articles, the person suspected of providing that anonymous tip. A man who'd grown up in the area, who'd known Sullivan, who'd testified at the trial of another moonshiner and gotten them sent to prison. A man who was still alive, living in Maryville, now in his 70s. Sullivan's memories pushed at me constantly, showed me where the man lived, showed me how to get to his house, showed me exactly how Sullivan had planned to kill him. Make it look like an accident, a fall down the basement stairs, nothing suspicious. I'm fighting it. Fighting the compulsion, the overwhelming urge to drive to Maryville and complete what Sullivan started. But it's getting harder. The memories are replacing my own. I'm starting to forget my life before the moonshine. Starting to think of myself as Sullivan. As if I've always been him. As if these hands have always known how to kill. Yesterday, I drove to Maryville, parked 2 blocks from the man's house, sat there for 3 hours, arguing with myself, with Sullivan, about whether to go through with it. In the end, I drove away. But I know I'll go back. The compulsion is too strong. Sullivan's unfinished business is becoming my unfinished business. I went back to the cove today, thinking maybe I could destroy the still, break the connection. But when I got there were 3 more jars on the shelf. Full. Fresh. Waiting. And the piece of paper had new writing on it, in that same old-fashioned hand. You drank. You're mine now. Finish what I started, or you'll never be free. The betrayer must pay. Complete the work. I'm Cade, and I made the mistake of tasting something that wasn't meant for me. Now Sullivan's memories are overwhelming my own. His rage is becoming my rage. And I know, with the certainty of someone who's killed 4 people and wants to kill a 5th, that I'm going to drive to Maryville tomorrow. I'm going to knock on that door, and I'm going to complete what Sullivan started 47 years ago, because I'm not Cade anymore. Not really. I'm Jacob Sullivan, and I have unfinished business to settle. You probably don't remember going down alone last Thursday, but the cave does. It sang your name back perfectly, every syllable, every inflection, like it had been practicing. I'm Morgan, a cave acoustics researcher working in Carter County, Kentucky, and 3 weeks ago we discovered a passage that's learning our voices, teaching itself words from a hymn sung by people who burned alive 73 years ago, and now it wants us to join the choir. Our team had been mapping the Limestone Ridge cave system for 6 months when we found the passage. It wasn't on any historical surveys, wasn't in any of the old mining records, just a narrow crack in the back wall of a chamber we designated as LR-47. The crack was maybe 2 feet wide, easy to miss if you weren't looking carefully. But when we put an airflow meter near it, we detected strong, consistent circulation. Something significant was on the other side. I volunteered to go through first. I'm the smallest on the team, and I specialize in acoustic analysis of cave formations. We were hoping for a virgin chamber, maybe some interesting formations, definitely some good data on how sound propagates through unmapped passages. I squeezed through the crack, my helmet lamp cutting through absolute darkness. The passage opened up immediately on the other side into a corridor maybe 8 feet high and 6 feet wide, walls smooth like they'd been carved deliberately. The floor sloped downward at a gentle angle, heading deeper into the mountain, and I heard singing. Not loud, not close, just a faint harmonic sound, like voices in the distance carrying through water. I stopped moving, killed my lamp, listened in complete darkness. The sound was coming from deeper in the passage, perfectly pitched notes forming a melody I almost recognized. It lasted maybe 20 seconds, then faded to silence. I reported it over the radio to my team outside. They couldn't hear it from their position, said it might be water sounds, air moving through narrow passages, the kinds of acoustic phenomena caves are known for. But I know sound. I know music. What I'd heard wasn't random noise. It was organized, intentional, structured like human singing. I continued down the passage alone. Protocol said to wait for backup, but I was already committed, already past the narrow entry point. The passage ran straight for maybe 200 feet, then opened into a chamber. Not huge, maybe 40 feet across and 20 feet high, with a domed ceiling covered in delicate soda straw formations, and the acoustics were perfect. I clapped once, and the reverb was clean, balanced, exactly the kind of natural resonance you'd want in a concert hall. That's when I heard it clearly. The singing, coming from everywhere and nowhere, filling the chamber with harmonized voices performing a hymn. I recognized the melody, Abide With Me, an old church hymn. 4-part harmony, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, the kind of arrangement you'd hear from a trained church choir. The voices were crystalline, perfect, rising and falling through the verses. I stood there in the darkness, listening, recording everything on my equipment. The hymn played through completely, all 4 verses, then faded gradually to silence. My instruments showed the sound was coming from the rock itself, vibrations in the limestone creating the acoustic effect. But limestone doesn't spontaneously produce 4-part harmonies of specific hymns. Something else was happening. I went back through the narrow passage, rejoined my team, played them the recording. They heard it, clearly, undeniably, human voices singing Abide With Me in perfect harmony. We spent the next week researching, trying to find rational explanations, acoustic resonance from water flow, wind patterns creating musical tones, residual vibrations from mining operations. Then one of our team members found the church fire. Grace Baptist Church, a small congregation in Carter County, burned down on December 17, 1952. It happened during the Christmas Eve service rehearsal. The whole congregation was there, maybe 60 people, practicing hymns for the holiday service. The fire started in the basement, spread fast, blocked the exits. Everyone inside died. The newspaper archives listed the hymns they'd been rehearsing that night. Abide With Me was one of them, and the church had been located directly above where our newly discovered passage ran. The cave system extended beneath the site where Grace Baptist had stood before the fire. We were hearing sounds from 73 years ago, somehow preserved in the rock, playing back through acoustic phenomena we didn't fully understand. That should have been enough. Document it, publish it. Let other researchers figure out the mechanism. But I went back down alone. I told myself it was for additional recordings, better data, more precise measurements. But really, I was fascinated. The idea that sound could be preserved in stone, that human voices could echo through decades, that a moment of tragedy could be frozen in the geology itself. It was profound, beautiful in a terrible way. I went through the narrow passage, entered the chamber, set up my equipment, and I waited. It took maybe 20 minutes, then the singing started again. Abide With Me, same arrangement, same perfect harmonies. But this time I sang along, just quietly, joining the harmony, my voice mixing with the phantom choir. The singing stopped immediately, complete silence for maybe 10 seconds. Then it started again, but different. The arrangement had changed slightly, incorporated a 5th harmony line. My line, the one I'd just sung, it was learning. I tested it over the next week, going down alone each time, singing different parts, different harmonies. Each time the phantom choir adapted, incorporated what I'd sung, integrated it into the hymn. It was teaching itself, expanding its range, adding complexity based on what it heard from living voices. The other team members noticed I was spending a lot of time down there. Started asking questions. I should have told them what I discovered, but I didn't. The singing cave felt like mine, like a secret I wanted to keep, like something precious that would be ruined if too many people knew. Then it started singing names. I went down on a Tuesday afternoon expecting the usual hymn. Instead, I heard my name, Morgan, sung in 4-part harmony, perfectly clear, integrated into the melody of Abide With Me, where the lyrics should have been. My name, repeated over and over, becoming part of the song. It had learned my name from the radio chatter, from my team members calling to me while I worked in the chamber. And it was using that name, calling to me, trying to communicate or lure me or accomplish something I didn't understand. I should have stopped going down, should have told someone what was happening, but I kept returning, kept listening to the cave sing my name in increasingly complex arrangements. It started adding other names too, my team members, people I'd mentioned in radio conversations, anyone whose name it had heard me speak. Last week, the hymn changed completely. Instead of "Abide with me," I heard come down, a different hymn, one I didn't recognize. I looked it up later. It was another song the Grace Baptist congregation had been rehearsing the night of the fire, one that hadn't been mentioned in the newspaper archives. The cave was accessing memories deeper than what we'd researched, pulling information from that night that existed nowhere in written records. Yesterday, I convinced another team member to come down with me. I wanted someone else to witness what I'd been experiencing. We went through the narrow passage together, entered the chamber, waited for the singing to start. It didn't. Complete silence. We waited for an hour, my colleague getting increasingly impatient, skeptical of my claims. Eventually, we left. As we were squeezing back through the narrow passage, I heard it start, faint, distant, the familiar hymn. But my colleague heard nothing. The singing only occurred when someone was alone in that chamber. This morning, I went down again. The chamber felt different, colder, the air heavier somehow. The singing started immediately, but it wasn't the hymn anymore. It was my voice, my exact voice, singing words I'd never spoken. Come down and join us. Come down and stay. The fire is warm here. The fire will keep you. Come down and sing. Come down and burn. I ran, got back through the narrow passage, back to the main chamber, back to where my team was working. Told them everything, the learning, the names, the changing hymns, the invitation. They listened, looked concerned, suggested I take some time off, mentioned that extended time in isolated cave systems can cause psychological stress. But I know what I heard. The cave is singing words it learned from people who died screaming 73 years ago. It's teaching itself our names, our voices, trying to add us to its choir. And I think it's succeeding, because last night, lying in bed miles from the cave, I heard singing. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. The phantom choir, performing in my bedroom, calling me back down. I'm going down again today. The cave wants me there. I can feel it pulling, the way you feel music in your chest when the bass is loud enough. It's singing my name right now. I can hear it through the walls, through the earth, through miles of rock and soil. Morgan, come down. Morgan, come sing. Morgan, join the fire. I know I shouldn't go. I know the smart thing is to seal that passage, mark it as dangerous, never return. But the singing is so beautiful, and I'm so tired of being the only one who hears it. Maybe if I go down one more time, if I join the choir completely, I won't feel so alone anymore. The cave remembers everyone who's ever been down there alone. It's learned all our names, practiced all our voices. And when you're in that chamber, in absolute darkness, surrounded by perfect acoustic harmony, it's easy to forget that you're listening to the echoes of people who burned alive. It's easy to believe that the fire they keep singing about is warm and welcoming and safe. I'm Morgan, and I found a cave that's learning to sing. It started with a hymn from 1952, taught itself our names, and now it's calling us down one by one to join its choir. My colleagues don't believe me. The recordings somehow never capture what I hear in person. And every day, the singing gets louder, more insistent, more impossible to ignore. I'm going down today. The cave is singing my name, and this time, I think I'm going to stay. If you enjoyed this story from the Haunted Fears horror family, don't let the darkness end here. Subscribe to the Haunted Fears YouTube channel for more bone-chilling tales that will keep you up at night. Every week, we bring you new stories of the unexplained, the terrifying, and the impossible, narrated to perfection and designed to haunt your dreams. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our growing family of horror enthusiasts who know that the best scares are the ones you can't explain away. The next story could be about something that happened right in your own town. Are you brave enough to listen?